Right. It looks like it's 10 o'clock. So Chairman Moody, if you want to call the meeting, and the one notice for all the members, if you're speaking, please put the microphone right to your mouth. Makes it really loud and clear to everyone online. So
thank you. Good morning. I'm Greg Moody. I'd like to welcome our attendees in person as well as online. Our special called meeting of the Utility Management. I believe I detect the quorum.
Present.
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 Present. We do have a quorum, and I call this meeting to order. The first item on the agenda is the reading of our conflict of interest. Turn it over to staff attorney.
The board was created to act for the public welfare and in furtherance of the legislature's intent that utility systems be operated as self-sufficient enterprises. Board members are not authorized to participate in the discussion of or to vote on matters involving entities in which the board member has a financial interest, with which the board member has a conflict of interest, with which the board member has a contract of employment, or if there is any appearance of impropriety.
And our agenda item is WIT Utility District.
thank you, Chairman. So board, really appreciate you all coming together for a special called meeting of the Utility Management Review Board. The last time we met, I made it very clear that that was the last time I was going to see y'all, right? It was the last UMRB meeting because, the UMRB ceases to exist on June 30. Oh, yeah. And then July 1 is when the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation starts. However, the investigative report regarding the WIT Utility District came out, and I received concerns from the board members that this is something that needs to be addressed due to the contents of that investigative report. And because we don't know when we'll be able to have the first meeting of the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation, it was imperative that we were able to call this meeting before the UMRB ceases to exist. So with that, board, I would like to start this meeting by reading the staff summary and staff recommendation that has been prepared to you all and shared in the packet that has been posted online. The WIT Utility District is a water-only utility district that serves roughly 2,100 customers in Hamlin and Jefferson counties. WIT's Board of Commissioners, the board, is comprised of 3 individuals, Michael Rouse, Michael Fagan, and Michael Sellers. WIT's general manager is Benjamin Harris. The Division of Investigations within the Tennessee Comptroller's Office released a report on May 17, 2023, summarizing its investigation into WIT. The investigation resulted in the indictments of WIT's manager, Benjamin Harris, and his brother, Joseph Harris, who serves as the district water treatment operator. The board's regularly scheduled meetings are held on the second Thursday of every month. The board canceled its June 8, 2023 regularly scheduled meeting, but held a special called meeting on June 13, 2023. Board staff is not aware of the actions taken to remedy the failure of internal controls that resulted in the actions underlying the May 17, 2023 investigative report, or any action to prevent further financial malfeasance. The Utility Management Review Board, UMRB, has recently been involved with the East Sevier County Utility District, or ESCUD, to oust its prior board members. ESCUD contracted with WIT, and WIT was able to remedy many of ESCUD's ongoing problems. UMRB staff recommends the UMRB initiate a contested case hearing to determine whether the board should be removed. One finding in the report provides, the district made questionable overtime payments to Benjamin Harris, totaling at least $67,292. From January 2022 to August 2022, Benjamin Harris received questionable overtime payments totaling at least $67,392 for approximately 1,664 hours. Investigators found time card documentation for other employees. However, they found no documentation or authorization supporting Benjamin Harris's time worked or claimed overtime compensation. For the period in question, Benjamin Harris was paid an average of 18.65 total daily hours of work in a 5-day work week and 52 overtime hours per week. Including 1 week, he was paid for 73 hours of overtime. The failure of management to review and approve employee time records increases the risk that time will be reported and paid incorrectly. By the end of August 2022, Benjamin's pay was changed from an hourly wage to salaried compensation. While this particular issue may have been remedied, it highlights the board's failure to implement proper internal controls to prevent such abuse from occurring. especially in light of its current failure to implement additional controls to prevent similar issues. The board members have a responsibility to be good stewards of public funds, so to prevent such excessive costs from being incurred by the utility. The members of the board have also been inappropriately compensated during at least the last 5 years. UMRB staff has requested copies of the annual training statements, which each board member is required to complete and file locally by January 31 of each year. Board members are ineligible to receive compensation and benefits if these training statements are not filed appropriately pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 782-308F4. WIT has not provided UMRB staff with documentation that it has adopted or amended its policies or made personnel changes to prevent or limit future bad acts since the release of the May 17, 2023 investigative report. UMRB staff is unaware of the board having considered or discussed the possibility of such changes at any of its properly noticed meetings. The Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation will assume all business of the UMRB on July 1, 2023, pursuant to Public Chapter 463. Therefore, any action that the UMRB takes today will continue under the T-Board. So with that being said, the recommendation for today, board, is the UMRB should order as follows. The UMRB hereby initiates a contested case hearing to determine whether WIT's current board members should be removed from office pursuant to Tennessee Code Annotated 782-307 and 702. UMRB staff and council shall prepare the matter for hearing, including having the matter docketed with the Secretary of State's Administrative Procedures Division. 2, UMRB staff is authorized to close the contested case should WIT's current board members resign, including by non-suit, motion to dismiss, or whatever other action is necessary. Last, UMRB staff shall determine the total amount of legal pay and benefits each board member has received during the period in which they have served and not filed an annual training statement. So with all that being said, board, one point that I think that it's very important for us to make here is that this case in front of us isn't necessarily about the indictments. What we're dealing with today is the board members. The board members have a responsibility to protect the ratepayers from any sort of fraud, waste, and abuse. What was contained in the May 17, 2023 investigative report is alarming, right? I mean, that's the easiest way to say it. And we have very strong concerns that these problems aren't being remedied, nor should they have occurred in the first place. So this isn't only about them occurring in the first place, and it's not only about them not remedying them yet. It's both sides of the coin. And to be very clear, we are not taking any action against either Harris employee at WIT Utility District. So with that, board, I would welcome any questions from the board directed at me, after which we will have a public comment period. Should the board find that acceptable?
Would the contested case be held here, or would it be in the county of WIT is?
The contested case hearing would be held here.
I've got several I'd like to have asked or answered by you for the record because of a lot of conjecture I've heard in East Tennessee in the last couple of weeks. So I don't know what the proper protocol. I've written them down. If I can just go down the list or how we want to do this.
I find that I'll leave that up to the chair, but I find that acceptable.
Okay.
I've got some questions too, but if you want to go.
You may have some of this.
Maybe, yeah. Ross, you mentioned briefly, but I don't know that I heard clearly when the reasoning and why pulling it ahead to the UMRB, because like, as you said, our last meeting said, hey, sayonara, we wouldn't be back. Would you clarify that reasoning why we would pull it? It was just the egregious fact of it. You would answer that first and just say why it was necessary to have a special call meeting.
Yeah. So the reason that a special called meeting was necessary for this was the concern from some of the board members addressed to me that, the report came out and there are concerns that we wouldn't be able to have a meeting anytime soon because we're waiting on appointments, a lot of 4 appointments from the governor's office to take place before the Tennessee Board of Utility Regulation will be able to have its first meeting. We hope to be able to have that meeting sooner rather than later, but there's no way to know. Whereas the UMRB, still in existence, we knew we could have a meeting this month.
Just one other couple, I've got several other questions, but things just from the staff summary that you. Can you please clarify that the overtime number is not a typo? Is that a decimal place wrong?
I do not believe so. That was what was contained in the May 17, 2023 investigative report. That is the actual number that was charged to the utility.
This is Kevin Bott. I'd like to ask for those of us that are online that if we could ask for everyone to speak into a microphone or to speak up would be greatly helpful.
Yeah, no, we will definitely do that. Sorry about that, Mr. Botts. If you have any issues, feel free to jump in. We're going to make sure that the board members speak into the microphone. Sorry about that.
I'll try to speak a little more closely to the microphone. I say that in scale. Obviously, I manage a small utility district, medium size, approximately just under 9,000 customers. And that number is rather excessive compared to at least my history. I pulled my numbers for overtime for our maintenance department of 21 employees, and it was around $11,000 for the entire year. And so that's why I was asking if it was a typo with only 2,100 customers.
Yeah, no, it is not a typo.
And I'm the same. We have 40,000 connections. I had 29 employees, and during 12-month period, we charged 57,000 and some change in overtime for 29 employees and 40,000 connections. So I wondered if it was a typo as well.
Let me ask a few more questions.
Yes.
Once I'm in Middle Tennessee, so I'm not near and don't, just things that from seeing this coming out, but seeing some of the things with eScud, this board acted, I guess it was in December, and then from the other two removed the other prior eScud board and the alliance, and just seeing things where eScud's water's been off and on. But this topic for today has no bearing on that prior action, correct? We're
Correct.
just simply dealing with the challenge to the WIT utility board, nothing with the indictment from Mr. Harris. And sounds like from the work that's been done should be commended for WIT stepping in to help eScud, that those people have water. And we had people standing here, dirty water and dirty laundry and no water for months on end. There should at least be some acknowledgement and appreciation for that service.
No, and so it is my understanding that things definitely have improved at the East Sevier County Utility District. It was East Sevier County Utility District has had a lot of problems, right? And I think we all acknowledged that at the last meeting. And things have improved over at eScud. Are they perfect? No, but they are much better than they previously were based on some of the input that I've received from customers. There are still some customers that are having issues, and we hope to see those remedied soon. But you're correct. We are appreciative that everything that WIT has done for eScud, but that is not the topic for today.
And two, just for my benefit, I know just from the size that WIT's got to be a fairly small utility district, but I at least saw one news report was reported, and I don't remember which agency or which reporter, but that there was at least a statement made that the state comptroller's office had either made threats or intended to remove licenses and or sever that relationship between them. Is that even possible from the state comptroller's website?
No. So we do not have the authority to remove anyone's operator's license. That is just not something that we can do.
That would actually be TDEC,
And
Yeah.
and we're not looking at that.
yeah, and also we did not send any sort of order to direct WIT to cease operations with eScud. So no, we did not remove any licenses or order WIT to cease its relationship with eScud.
One last question, at least for now. Is eScud still in water, right? They're not in jeopardy of their service being interrupted due to any of these actions, the review of this?
There will be nothing done today that should jeopardize the water at eScud.
I have a question. So the board at WIT, if we vote to have this second round, the hearing, right, for them to, are they expected to come with and give this board an understanding as to why those financial controls were not in place and this situation was allowed to go on as long as it did go on? And are they also expected to come and explain what they've done to remedy this from never happening again in the future? What is the expectation from the comptroller's office for an explanation from the board at WIT?
I can probably best answer this question. We can't control, and we wouldn't try to control how someone presents their defense.
No, I'm not assuming that.
Sure, right. What we would present is why we believe that it's appropriate that their board be removed, and then they would be allowed to present whatever evidence they think is appropriate for why they should not be.
Were there any internal controls in place that we're aware of, or can y'all speak to that? Did the investigation show anything there?
So I would say that the internal controls that they have are probably what is standard for utilities in Tennessee. Whether they were followed or not seems to be the issue. Like, I don't have a doubt that they have, purchasing policies, competitive bidding policies, but whether they were actually followed after their implementation, that's generally the question mark there.
How long has each board member served? I mean, have they been through the training and the requirements for state law? Obviously, you make reference that the training requirement wasn't filed, but it has been training. Have they been served long enough to have experience?
Yeah, so it is my understanding, and we'll actually later on, representative from the Witt Utility District, Mr. Brandstetter, he's their attorney. He would like to address the board. He might be able to give the exact dates or roughly, but based on my knowledge of the situation, 2 of the 3 members have been serving for quite some time. We do have training records that show that they've attended different TAUD conferences to get training. I believe that some of them have even completed our online training. I believe that there's one gentleman who's more new to the board, but it is my understanding that he also has attended training. But so for the most part, they've been serving for several years.
I've got a question regarding recommendations for, I wrote it down. Did the Witt Utility District influence the recommendations for names to be provided to the Sevier County Mayor's office for appointments after the resignation from our prior actions?
To my knowledge, no. Whenever the East Sevier County Utility District board resigned, we had discussions with, our office had discussions with the Sevier County Mayor to try to figure out what the best solution for them as far as getting board members appointed is moving forward. I, as staff to the UMRB and the Comptroller's office, did not ask for any input from the Witt Utility District on who would be the best fit for the commissioners there. Ultimately, the Sevier County Mayor is the one who makes those appointments in instances such as that, but Witt Utility District was not consulted by our office for the appointment of those names.
Also heard rumors of a secret fund that y'all have to provide to help East Scud and Witt. Is there something that I'm completely unaware of?
No. I'm glad that you brought that up. We do not have any money that Witt or East Scud is eligible for us to fund an operation in which Witt manages or does anything with the East Sevier County Utility District. What we do have is we have the Utility District Revitalization Fund. In order to be eligible for that fund, you have to be undergoing a board-ordered merger. The first step, according to the law, for a board-ordered merger is a feasibility study. The East Sevier County Utility District is currently under an order to get that feasibility study completed. But since we are not even close to having any sort of board-ordered merger, we are not eligible to give anyone funds, especially to fund the management operation between 2 utilities.
So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Mr. Ross, I want to ask you what I think is a fair, but maybe a hard question. I know I've seen at least one news report that's your neck of the woods. Did you have any part in 2020? Going back, I know there were some allegations in one news report that you, when you were a staffer, initiated or participated in initiating an investigation into it. Or do you have any personal agenda with respect to Witt Utility District?
Yeah, so to answer the first part of your question, whenever in 2020, whenever the UMRB was first looking at having a UMRB board investigation into the Witt Utility District, that was the result of a letter sent to our office by the Hamlin County Mayor, the Jefferson County Mayor, the Mayor of Morristown, and the Mayor of Jefferson City. They sent us a letter requesting us to look into the managerial, financial, and technical capabilities of the Witt Utility District due to local issues. That information was presented to this board by my predecessor, John Greer. I had no part in bringing that forth in front of the board, nor did I author any sort of report or letter for this board to consider. As far as any sort of personal relationship, because I myself am from Morristown, I lived there for 8 years. I didn't meet Mr. Harris for the first time until last year at the TAUD conference. I've never known the family, so no, there is just no personal relationship there.
So, go ahead.
Can I ask a question as well? So, is there anything illegal with another utility helping another utility like as far as a mutual aid agreement?
No, there, generally, we see mutual aid agreements occur in instances of emergency. Outside of that, I wouldn't necessarily call it mutual aid. I just call it, a contract between two utilities. Generally speaking, local governments enter into contracts with each other often, especially in utilities for small utilities. We see, many instances in which the utilities are just trying to provide services to be good stewards of, what's best for the community. So no, there is nothing illegal between what the Witt Utility District is doing for the East Sevier County Utility District. However, it was mentioned in our report that originally there were issues in which the Witt Utility District was performing work for the East Sevier County Utility District before a contract was executed. Our investigators did believe that there was a potential liability issue for the Witt Utility District to start performing work for another utility without a signed agreement by both boards. However, it's my understanding, because I've read the latest agreement, that there is a signed agreement right now, and I am told that they are currently working on a new agreement between the two utilities.
So do you have any idea what happens if, with East Scud, if Witt leaves?
Yeah, I don't know the exact answer, but in talking with several utilities in the area, there are utilities that are willing to help. Last week, it was my understanding that the Witt Utility District had planned to leave the East Sevier County Utility District. My understanding that then they were having water supply issues. One of the first calls that I made was to the city of Newport, because I know that they are extremely close in proximity to the East Sevier County Utility District, and they were willing to send someone that morning to make sure that the water stayed on as soon as they got some sort of signed agreement between the East Sevier County Utility District for Newport to perform that work. So I bring that up to say there are utilities in the area that are willing to help. And I think that it's just important that all of the options are considered when the help is being sought, and it's very clear what the help exactly is, what kind of help exactly is needed.
East Scud has applied with rural development for some, I forgot the term they use, but basically emergency funding to drill a new well because their primary well is not performing hardly at all. So they are trying to fix that problem.
I realize it's not the agenda for today, but I'm certainly super empathetic towards East Scud because from our board's position, the old board was ousted. You have new board members that come in head spinning that may not even know where the keys or where the bank are, or where the money is, or even where the bathrooms are. And so you're trying to provide service to people who are here, have been without a long time. So me, I certainly empathetic and sympathize with board members in the position of East Scud. But in light of that, with the investigation, if there is malfeasance, if there is fraud, if there is theft, well, one doesn't justify the other. So look at those things and try to keep, but I want to make sure that anything we're considering today, and you've answered that, has no bearing or relationship on East Scud's operation and desire that this board took the position to ouster a board that's negligent to get them service for people that have been without a long time. So I'm appreciative for that because take the money side out of it. That's what our task is, right? To provide good drinking water and safe drinking water to our neighbors and our customers. With that board being new and the board that's there, I mean, I guess, is there any history or crossover between them? I mean, you mentioned many other people that are in the neighborhood. How did the relationship from East Scud to Witt? Was it just a flash, ask everybody in the neighborhood? Witt was the first one that answered. Was it a formal request for proposals? Was it an engineer that helped them solicit to get aid? Now, and lots of times I'm sure, Bruce, you have a neighbor in need, you go help and provide immediate aid to keep people in water. A verbal understanding would then satisfy any expenditures thereafter as long as you close that loop.
Sure. So it's my understanding that the relationship started so in March, I really think it was March, that's when Alliance left the Sevier County Utility District. And at that time, based on what I've been told, is a representative of the East Sevier County Utility District went to surrounding utilities asking for mutual aid to pull pumps from the wells. It is based on what I've heard, the other utilities said no. They don't want to help pulling pumps. They didn't really see the need for it. And Witt Utility District was willing to do that. Prior to that arrangement being set up, is Witt Utility District had interest in helping ESCUD prior to March, prior to our board meeting in December. As board staff, we went to the East Sevier County Utility District board meeting. I believe it was last August, and it was at that meeting that I met Mr. Ben Harris with the Witt Utility District. I actually met him earlier that day at the TAUD conference. But regardless, so Mr. Harris was there on behalf of Witt, but also to see if there's anything that Witt could do to assist the East Sevier County Utility District. So it's my understanding that Mr. Harris was involved with the East Sevier County Utility District for some time before that relationship with Alliance dissolved in ESCUD. But once Alliance officially left ESCUD is when Witt was officially involved.
Mr. Moody, I have a question. What were the commissioners being compensated at Witt Utility? I know that there is a set amount that they can receive. Was there any health coverage or anything else that they were receiving as compensation?
So unfortunately, I don't know that answer off the top of my head. I think I'd rather leave that for a representative of Witt to answer that later. I don't know if they received any sort of health benefits from their service there.
Mentioned in the staff summary, management's failure on, in particular, the one issue mentioned in overtime. As I understand, Mr. Harris is the general manager, and so I know at our utility, our board doesn't come in and sign payroll or review, though that's my job to look at everybody's timesheets and things of that nature, and it represents no timesheets. To me, that seems a little bit an odd managerial or odd position to take there, but to me, it wouldn't be uncommon board members to see necessarily week-to-week payrolls, but I'm assuming regular monthly board meetings, they did produce P&L statements. You were able to track budgeted expenditures and see if that's not a typo, a significant overrun being ahead of the budgeted amount during the time period. Is that
sure? And that's
the P&Ls offered?
No, and that's somewhat the basis of kind of why we're here today. Is during regularly scheduled board meetings, it's up to the board to be able to review those things to make sure that everything is going smoothly. In an 8-month period, to be paying out that much in overtime, it should seem fairly uncommon. And the fact that there was no oversight for a manager to be paid that in such excess, it speaks to the lack of a desire to have the internal control to prevent issues like that from occurring.
It also mentioned, I'm sorry, I stepped on you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so with that, have there been prior year audit findings that management has either had to address with either controls, internal controls, things of that nature? And what is the nature? I know if we get audit findings, you got to send you guys a lovely letter and explain what we did and what we're going to do to fix it. So
sure. So in recent years, I wouldn't say that they've had audit findings that I haven't really seen before. A lot of smaller utilities, I see, similar findings often. The most recent finding has been regarding not closing their books in a timely fashion, be able to have the accounting records properly available for their audit. And that was a finding from last year, said it was to be corrected. However, the audit for this year still is incomplete because the books were, not closed in time, and they weren't in a fashion that they could be audited. So it looks like it's going to be another repeat finding for that.
You know how many employees Witt Utility District has?
I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say it's less than 10, but I think that can be answered by them later on.
And second, do you know
Also,
why the board?
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I was just, I wanted to, and I apologize for interrupting here. I wanted to ask, I understand that the books have yet to be closed. When was that due?
So if they're fiscal year end, you give me a second, I can tell you. Because I know they're not a June 30 fiscal year end. They are a, oh. So they're a September 30th. So their fiscal year end is September 30th. And so the audit finding that they received was accounting records were not closed within 60 days of fiscal year end. So if they needed to be closed 60 years. Say that one more time, Mr. Bob.
Previous year.
Yeah, so previous
My
year.
question
So yes.
The previous year. So this will be 2 consecutive years. Am I hearing that correct?
So given I had the audit is not complete, but it should be 2 consecutive years of the same finding if the books were not closed timely come last November for the 2022 fiscal year.
So we're roughly 9 months
Thank
then.
That,
Okay.
That's what, that's what I'm going for. Thank you. That's exactly. Thank you for the clarification.
No problem. Thank you, Mr. Botts.
Part of the reason, going back to the origin of my question over the scale of the overtime, when I look back at the 21 audit, that's the last one I could find at the court finding database that you guys have. I think labor was in the neighborhood of $350-ish thousand was the labor line item. Best I recall, somewhere in the neighborhood of
Mhm.
350. Take 67%, you're well north of, you're pushing 20% of the total labor budget for that one item. That's one clarification. To me, I would have the reasonable expectation. I think that board members would see a 20% overrun, particularly one line item. That's, I don't know, that seems a little bit off-putting to me.
Sure.
Do we have any idea why the board switched him from an hourly to a salary employee after the 8 months?
I have not asked them that question directly, so I can't provide that. It may be to remedy exactly what that finding in the investigative report is about, but I do not know why he switched to a salaried employee at that time.
Dealing with some of the other items there, did the board approve? I know the one was the roof project that's charged or alleged or whatever the proper legal term is. Did the board approve that purchase order, and was it done in a bid, quote, order, board approved payment scenario, or can you further clarify that?
So I will say, I don't know every single piece of evidence that went into this investigative report. Based on my understanding, that project was, I believe, purchased adequately. It was just part of it ended up being for his own personal residence. So I don't believe that wasn't like bid out or anything incorrectly based on what I know. But that is definitely a question for our investigators that I just don't have the information to be privy to. But there are findings later on in the investigative report about improper purchasing and bidding improperly and not going about purchasing certain items the correct way. So that is part of the investigative report. I just don't think I don't know if it applies to the roof.
To your knowledge, did the board know of and approve the use of WIT equipment? Bobcat, I think, was an item, driving of the company truck and another. Did the board know and approve of those activities?
I would be speculating. I would hope that they were aware, but I would be speculating.
Further questions?
So if it's amenable to the board, there are some folks that have signed up to be able to address the board today. And I would like to, as long as everyone's okay with that, we have allocated 3 minutes per speaker. And so if the board is okay, I'd like to call up the folks individually. Whenever you do come up, whoever's going to speak, once I call your name, please come sit here. I'll make sure that microphone is on. Really get that microphone into your face to make sure that your voice is carried online. So, board, if that's okay, I'd like to call the first person who signed up.
I think public comments are appropriate now.
Okay, great. So first I have Mr. Louis Fromm. And so if you wouldn't mind just coming up here and stating your name and kind of who you are, and yeah, sit right. Testing. All right.
Hello, my name, I'm prepared a statement here. To be a utility, but apparently the East Sevier County Utility District and WIT Utilities have essentially one and the same. Our phone number is forwarded and rings. Our billing and personal information file with, as they apparently handle all of our accounting and billing now. WIT has even taken the liberty of changing out all of our water meters to better suit their preferred billing system. Now, on April 20th, this board decided to limit EastGov's ability to negotiate a merger without a proper rate study. I fear that this board was entirely unaware that not only had this merger already been negotiated, but also for all intensive purposes, fully executed. It would seem as if the only piece of the puzzle we are missing is a legal process of justifying what has already been done. It would seem that if bankruptcy may also be an integral part of that plan, seeing as how GUD now claims to be a rate study or a proper audit. I'll have to admit that our overall water bills have been significantly lower since the merger that never was. Half of my neighbors, myself included, have not even received bills in months. The online EastGov billing portal still links to an authority pay site of which WIT claims to not have any access to, but still sees fit to leave active. Now, I would imagine that solvency is rather difficult when you're not attempting to collect any receivables, but what do I know? I'm not even a WIT customer, right? Now, I'm sure this UMRB is fully aware of all these things. Surely diligence was performed, but considering the slight possibility that maybe this one got slipped through the crack. We're seeing Mr. Colonna here, our first official board meeting. Upon his departure. And I distinctly remembered a final piece of advice. Engage, become a member, get help with grants, funding, accounting, proper procedure. It's a funny thing that I actually called Todd last week. Could not find EastGov anywhere in their member rosters. Now, surely this is a typo. I was at the February board meeting when we actually took a proper vote to join Todd. So where was the oversight? Where was the follow through? Well, I mean, this investigation into WIT was launched back in 2021, far predates the current EastGov board appointments. In fact, WIT even came highly recommended and endorsed by TDEC officials and state senators. So why did the comptroller's office fail to intervene? Were they aware? I mean, surely they were aware that there was an active investigation into Benjamin Harris. Based on the findings of that report, they clearly had surveillance. How is it they're not aware of a complete takeover from the inside at EastGov? I would humbly implore the comptroller's office and this UMRB to learn from those mistakes. Please do not allow another vacuum to be created when this board decides to clean house. And yes, that house absolutely does need to be cleaned. Follow through, provide proper oversight. Please regain my trust. I thank you for your time. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Fromm. Y'all just give me 1 second. I'm going to try to switch this microphone out. It was coming in and out. John, do you think that's necessary? All right, board, next on the list, I have Miss Heather Fromm. Would just state your name whenever. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Heather Fromm. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I was last here on December the 8th, 22, begging for your help because my water was brown and I couldn't do anything with it except for flush a toilet. I'm here today because my water is still brown and it's not good for anything but toilet flushing. I ask every single month at the EastGov board meeting, would you give a bottle that's made out of this water to your grandbaby? My answer is no. It's always no. I don't feel as though I should pay a premium price for an unquality product. Now, I'm not here today because of EastGov, but I kind of am because your opinion today, your decision today that affects WIT will directly affect me because they are in charge managing our company. And it may seem a little hard to follow because eScud has been using WIT to manage the system. And by manage, I mean, I'm going to give credit to where credit's due. They have been under full management, finances, improvements, and daily operations. I'm unable to pay my bill in cash at the eScud office because there's no one there to take it. I believe in the system of oversight and just doing the next right thing. eScud was in a poor position due to the lack of proper oversight by the previous board. WIT's board has failed its customers, not to mention holding its employees accountable. They need to be accountable. Prior to WIT managing our finances at eScud was paying Alliance $54,000 every month. And the first monthly meeting after WIT takes over our finances, we're broke. We can't afford to pay a secretary to take cash. I don't understand. I'm a mother of 6, and I've tried to teach my children that being an adult is hard and is full of difficult decisions. Actions have consequences, and my children understand that if they make a poor decision, there will be consequences for their actions, and they may have a punishment. eScud customers will be directly affected by your decision today. I'm asking this board to please follow the recommendation of staff and help guide the new board with oversight and make the proper decisions that will affect WIT and eScud customers alike. Thank you.
All right, board. Next, I have Mr. Ron Cooley. Don't mind just your name. Really come close to your mouth there.
Thank you for the time to speak to you. My name is Ron Cooley. I was on the board of eScud. I resigned after 3 months. I found out if you can't do it right, if you can't do it legal, it's time to get out. There's items that I cannot address to you in the open meeting. I would just say this, that right now, from what little bit I was able to see while I was there, which was very limited, eScud, one, WIT Utilities has all the finances of eScud, everything, billing, accounts receivable, the whole shooting match. How do we know how much money we have at eScud? We don't. How does a board member stand up and say we've got $5,000? They don't know. The secretary, we had all the billing equipment necessary to put out our own bill. Their bills have been gone 2 and 3 months at a time and nobody got one. If you don't have accounts receivable, you don't have money. Can anybody tell me how you operate any business without accounts receivable? These items has to be addressed. Yes, this is about WIT's utility and WIT's board. Ben has been making trips to our mountain since I believe it was June or July. He met at Jerry Hayes, who is the president of the board, house, multiple meetings. I mean, we have food and everybody, hey, Ben Harris can fix the mountain. We could have actually, eScud could have hired anybody. They said he couldn't get nobody else to do it. I went over and checked with another utility, and they said that they would be happy to enter into a mutual aid agreement with us. And they had another company who was in a mutual aid agreement with them that would probably be more than happy. But Mr. Hayes assumed the responsibility of being the only point man to go out and see who would work with us. I agree. our water pipes have got to be changed. I agree that Mr. Harris has done a good job. It wasn't a difficult job, but it was a good job. Well, it's in the contract that it would be working correctly. It is not. I cannot question him in front of the board about this, but if that's left up to y'all to do. But it says under the contract that well F will be put into service. They left up pumping enough water to put into service. All I'm asking is the ship's captain is responsible for whatever happens to that ship. And the board is responsible for all oversight below them. So just like our old board was moved out because they did not follow through and contain and control their actions below them. I can't tell you to do it, but WIT's board is responsible for all action below them.
Thank you, Mr.
And I thank you for your time. And I'm not riled up or mad at anybody. I come on a little forceful. I'm also a retired law enforcement officer, so I have that built in me. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. All right, next I have Miss Lisa Hawthorne. Wouldn't mind just state your name whenever you start, please.
Hi, my name is Lisa Hawthorne. So I realize that you guys are getting a lot of angry people that live on our mountain that want Ben gone, that want him to step away. I'm telling you all right now, for the love of God, do not get rid of Ben Harris. Do not do anything with our board members that we have. Because right now, guys, if it wasn't for Ben Harris and his company, if it wasn't for Jerry and everybody else on our board, we would have nothing. Nothing. Yes, our water isn't always perfect. But that's not their fault. Ben has busted his butt since he's been on that mountain. He's worked time and time and time again to prove he's going to do what he tells us he's going to do. And we're all seeing that. Our board members are doing what they said they will do. We have to have Ben and WIT on our mountain to fix it. They can tell you all they want that other companies have said they will do this and they will do that. No, they won't. No, they won't. Unfortunately or fortunately for me, I have been in Sevier County long enough to know people that people don't know. I've got contacts that people don't have. People are not going to come help us on that mountain. They're not. They don't care if we have no water. The problem with that is, you guys, if all of a sudden we don't have any water on that mountain and one house catches on fire, the entire mountain is gone. So does somebody really want to have that responsibility? Do you really want that on your head, that we've got elderly people that we can't get out of a house because all of a sudden somebody's got a problem with Ben? Ben busts his butt and he works hard. So he's had some overtime hours and it's made somebody angry. I own my own personal business. Ben stepped in and took the place of his dad. What do you think he's going to have? No overtime? He's putting his boots on every day and he's putting his daddy's boots on with him to make sure that everybody is taken care of. Ben's top priority has been English Mountain. And if everybody sitting here can't be grateful for that, there's a problem. I personally, I'll pay his bills out of my company if they will just let him stay. I will pay our board members if you all will just let them stay. We need every single one of them on English Mountain. It's the only prayer we even have. Ben has made huge differences up there. I don't care about the little bit of brown water that we've got. It's better than no water, which we had for a long time. Please, whatever you do, whatever is going on with Ben Harris, you need to stop, because he's an amazing man. He's darn good at what he does, and we have to have him on English Mountain. If you just don't listen to anything at all that anybody has to tell you, we need our board members and we need WIT on that mountain. It's the only prayer we've got.
Thank you. All right, next, Mr. Charles Rogers. you just wouldn't mind starting by saying your name when you start.
My name is Charles Rogers. In your board packet, it talks about being, his house into shingles. In that packet, it says he used 27 squares of shingles, which is 81 bundles. If you go to Ben's house, Ben lives in a house, it's approximately 1,200 square feet. His roof is roughly 15 squares, so there's 12 squares somewhere that's not right. It says in the board packet, but you got the information from the roofer, so the roofer either didn't tell the story right, or he didn't know what he was doing, because you can take the dimensions of the roof and figure it real easily. If that being the case, how do you even know that the roofer is even telling the truth about that Ben didn't pay? I mean, there's no proof. It's just word of mouth is what it appears. I want you as a board to really think about, is it even true what's in this packet? That's all I got to say.
Thank you. Next, I have Mr. Eddie Crosby. No problem, sir. Take your time. You wouldn't mind just starting by identifying yourself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Eddie Crosby. I'm the newest of the three East Gud members. I was brought into that position 2 months ago. Well, last meeting was my second meeting. I'll put it that way. Our other two members have been there since January, if I'm not mistaken. So we're all a very new crew to this. But I'd like to open up with stating that if it was not for Ben Harris and Witt Utilities and what they have done, I don't know what position would really be in right now, other than the fact that I'm going to have to sell my home as well as others, because we can't depend on having water to flush a toilet. I mean, that's a common thing, flushing a toilet. It's ridiculous what we're actually dealing with right now. Now, granted, we had this problem all before the old board was moved and the other contractor was in. We still had that problem. Now, granted, we've had water for 140 days straight, other than for a 6-hour synopsis of a leak in an area that they come out at midnight and fixed. I guess what I need to what boils down to what I've got prepared here. Witt Utility has come in. They have laid over 7,000 feet of pipe. They have fixed leaks. They have replaced valves. They have replaced pumps. We have a system right now that is still having to be manually operated with switches because we don't have level controls. Now, when you pull that guy out, we don't have anybody to go in there and say, cut the pump off because the well water's overfilling. We've never had a tank overfill until he showed up. We've never had enough water until he showed up. Now we're having to cut pumps off. The mountain's full of water. We just weren't getting the water. Mr. Harris has done that. Thankful to Mr. Harris and his board members that have allowed him to be on our mountain and work. I take my hat off to him. Are there things that have happened that's wrong? I'm sure there is. If you look deep enough, you'll find things I've done wrong. If I look deep enough, I'll find things you've done wrong. I'm not saying that mean, but it's part of it. We need to come together as a group and fix our water issue on English Mountain. That's the bottom line. That's why we're here. You know, I was once told, I'm sure I'm running close on my minutes here.
You're all right.
I was once told that I cannot pray in a meeting. I want you guys to know I can pray in a meeting. I will pray over this meeting. I will pray over every board meeting that I attend. It might be my own little prayer, but I've seen where that guy works harder than anybody in here. Need y'all to take that to heart and think about it. Yes, I'm a religious man. Yes, I'm a minister. And yes, I will pray in our meetings. No government official can tell me that I cannot.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Not a problem. Can't say enough.
All right, next I have Mr. Jerry Hayes. All right, Jerry, if you wouldn't mind when you start, just identifying yourself through the microphone and get that.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jerry Hayes. I'm the Commissioner of East Good. I'm here on behalf of WIT Utilities. Prior to 2023, last year, there was never a week gone by where somebody wasn't without water on English Mountain. Sometimes it might be for a day. There's been times we've been out for 2 and 3 weeks at a time. One of the other folks had made a comment about Well F. I will let you know about Well F, Mr. Cooley. I'm going to tell you right now, when we took this over, we were told, and East Good was told, it's in their records, that Well F was 1,150 feet deep. Mr. Harris bought 1,100 feet of pipe and a pump, and we run the pipe. I was there with them. I was seeing what was going on. Well, this is what happens at East Good. We've been lied to over the years. We were lied to again. When they run the pipe, it wasn't 1,150 feet. It was dead on 750 feet. We run the pipe, we run the pump, we turned it on. It pumped about 5-10 minutes and it was dry because it was never drilled to 1,150 feet. WIT Utility has been a blessing to us. Their board, we have sat with their board and talked with them, and they have come to help us. When they walked in the door in March, well A and B was only pumping about 21 to 22 minutes of water. I mean, 21 to 22 gallons of water a minute. Right now, thanks to WIT Utility and everything they've done to help us, those same 2 wells are now pumping on average of 72 gallons per minute. This, because of everybody trying to shove this out, we were supposed to, WIT and Mr. Harrison and Marty agreed on it. We were going to get a complete filtration system that was going to service the whole mountain. Some of y'all might have known of it. It was over there at one of their facilities. It's sitting inside of a big building. They were going to take the roof off of it, bring it to us to help service us. But because of people throwing fits about them and all their negative, he said, Jerry, I ain't doing nothing other than keeping y'all in water until we get this all figured out. We're begging y'all to keep WIT Utilities going and running because you know what? Like Mr. Crosby said, we've gone 140 something days. But I'm going to show y'all folks, each and every one of y'all, I want to think about this. Mr. Harris got thrown in jail because of the accusations. Okay? He got his mug shot. He got everything. But you know what happened right after he got out of jail? We had a major storm up on English Mountain. Knocked out the booster pump on Well C's booster pump. Blew a daggum pipe, a 6-inch pipe, sky high. Whether it's coincident or whatever. But I'm sitting there side by side with Mr. Harris till after midnight, the day he got out of jail because of all the accusations that everybody's put on him. He was there side by side with me and some Eddie Crosby and Trish Rogers trying to stop because if it wasn't for him coming over there, knowing where the valves were, which ones to shut off, it would have drained our whole mountain. Does that sound like the kind of person that would just totally try to mess people around? No. Folks, I don't know about y'all, but how many of y'all ever laid concrete? If you buy 6 yards of concrete and you only use 5.5, no matter what, you're going to be charged for 6 yards of concrete, whether you dump it on the ground or dump it somewhere else. Folks, these are ridiculous accusations in my book. I've read it. I mean, they were trying to get him for moving a dead cow out of a creek because he used the wet backhoe coming out of their filter water system. Let's get real, folks. I'm sorry. There's been a lot of accusations. Let's put the big one. Why ain't somebody investigated our old board who took thousands and hundreds of thousands from us, who left us with over $400,000 in debt? But I don't see nothing but a slap on the hand of them. I've seen some of these people that's been up here sitting, talking about this, actually meeting with the old board members.
Mr. Hayes.
My time's up. Thank y'all, folks. Keep wit.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Yep. All right, board. So the last two individuals that have requested to speak are Mr. Ben Harris and the attorney for WIT, Dewey Brandstetter. I don't know if they have a preference on whether they kind of come up together to represent WIT, or that's both of you come up at the same time. John, would you actually? Never mind, John. We'll use this mic. Yeah, y'all come up here. Right. Yeah, y'all just identify yourself.
My name is Ben Harris, General Manager at WIT Utility. I appreciate you guys letting me speak today about all this situation. Theodore Roosevelt once wrote, "It's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, whether the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit actually belongs to the man in the arena, who knows at the end of Trump of high achievement, and at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly." I got a call from my mom, 4:30 in the morning, that my dad had passed away on January 8, 2021. At 7 o'clock that morning, WIT Utility was open for business. I had no staff. I was sick with COVID. All my staff was sick with COVID. And it was worse for me because I had just been on a ventilator 7 months before from an accident that I had to learn to walk again with. I've had 5 family members die in 2 years, but let me tell you what I have done in 2 years. I have laid 14.2 miles of pipeline. I have put in 27 fire hydrants. I've got my water loss down from 33% to 14%. My ETT score dropped from 11 down to 5. So this time that's been in overtime that's in question from January of 22 to August of 22. We laid 10.6 miles in-house. I'm doing my daddy's job and my job. We hired nobody else. I still have the same staff. We hauled over 40,000 cubic yards of rock from our quarry and sold it to make enough money to lay the 10 miles of pipe that I did in January to August. I've jumped over 300 service lines in that area just with our staff and guys that we had as hired labor. During that time, I saw an opportunity to expand into Chestnut Hill. In Chestnut Hill, I've mapped over 200 and something miles of pipeline. I have went door to door counting houses, 4,000 to 5,000 homes of potential to get water, interconnecting 9 utilities. I have met with Governor Lee twice. I have met and spoke in front of the Senate Agriculture Committee about the interconnection that this had, the opportunity that it had to help Pigeon Forge and Sevierville and Newport and all of us. I have went road to road, mapped every inch of that, developed a PER for a $100 million water expansion. I have worked myself 7 days a week, daylight to dark. I don't have 40 people. I have me and my 2 brothers and 4 office girls and 1 more that I hired just for eScud. When I was handed eScud Utility, TDEC asked me, would you, with your project in Chestnut Hill, could you get eScud water? That's how I got involved with eScud, because I was asked by TDEC. I said, yes, it's 2 miles from my pipe. Ron Cooley, Trish Rogers, Jerry Hayes, and Charles Rogers came to my office because Governor Lee's office had recommended me that I might be able to help. They all sat in my office and asked me, could we help? I went to my board and said, can we help them? I started looking. There is no maps up there. They've been erased. The reason the computer system is in my office is because it's been erased. When I walked in that place, they had $64,000 in the bank. It's all gone. They have left bills that's not been paid, books that have been falsified. I have no payables. I can't even read the meters because the computer system that read the old meters, the digital meters they had, the radio reads, it's all. I have worked daylight to dark, and no, I don't work 5 days a week at 18 hours a week. I work 7 days a week, 13, 12, 13, 14-hour days. I mean, I don't know what else I could do. I have dropped eScud's water loss in half. They don't need more pipes since they need their infrastructure fixed. They have plenty of water on that mountain. The reason they weren't getting it through is because they had 2-inch galvanized that you could even get your finger through, trying to get 100,000 a day through it. You can't do it. I have rebuilt their whole pump station, laid 7,000 feet of pipe, and they got their system stable. And no, it's not perfect. They are right. They do have brown water. We've got $5,000 in the bank to spend that we can't touch. I mean, I'm doing the best I can. I don't know what more that I could have done. And these subjective allegations that's out there today, I can't speak of that, but I'm going to have my day. And I promise you, that's a whole nother side of this story that you guys don't know. I don't appreciate the subjectiveness to it. I find it highly prejudiced and constitutionally offensive. That's not what we're here to talk about. My board has stood by me, and we've done a heck of a job. A heck of a job. The reason our audit isn't done is because our auditing firm, working with the comptroller, asked them to stop finishing the audit for 22. I don't have an audit complete because they worked together to stop it until the investigation was done. That's the reason the 22 audit's not done. And the oversight that's been talked about, yes, we did hire Auditor Moss in May of last year to help us with our books and our accounting because I lost one of my best secretaries retired. I had to start over again with secretarial staff. I've expanded. We've got 200 new meters that we put in this time frame as well. I've never had a grant. My daddy took over WIT Utility 27 years ago. We've never had a grant. We started out with an 80% water loss and was as bad as eScud. Philip Combs helped us I don't know how many times. We had an old backhoe that used more motor oil a day than it did diesel fuel. And a pickup truck. That's all we had. And if anybody don't believe it, I'll show you pictures. We started from 600 customers and 30 miles of pipe to 170 something miles of pipe, and 95% or 90% of my infrastructure is new within the past 20 years, 25 years. There ain't a utility in this state that's that way, and I've never got any grant help. We built our own water plant ourselves. Everything we do in-house, road bores, we drill our own rock, we even crush our own rock if we need to. I mean, that's the only way I can get things done. It's just us. Me and my 2 brothers, excuse me, my 2 brothers. And we've a few part-time kids that we get in high school. But I mean, I'm just asking you, if we've made a mistake, we'll fix it. But I promise you, it is not what they think, what everybody says it is. I would like the opportunity to sit down, even if we sit down with you guys or the comptroller or anybody, and explain, here's how these bids happen. We didn't bid the work. We asked for 3 contractors to give us price on a daily rate because we paid them by the day to help us with some of the things we were doing. Every one of you managers know that a year and a half ago during COVID, you couldn't get water pipe. We can't get bids for something we can't get. I mean, you were lucky to call Consolidated or GNC and anybody and get anything. And luckily, we had bought up enough pipe before Dad had passed away to do the expansions that we had, or we couldn't have done it for what we've done. My books are still good. If you look at the amount of work we've done with what little money we had, and I'm still making money. I've replaced my dozer, bought another Peterbilt lowboy truck to pull our big equipment. I mean, generators, trenchers, I mean, you name it. I mean, and we're still making money. So if I need to correct something and my board needs a different oversight or develop a policy, that's what we've got our attorney for. And we have been working on that. But I've not had a full audit since I've been the manager that's under my name. So until then, I mean, if I've made a mistake, we'll fix it. But I'm just like the opportunity to do it because once a contested case starts, from my understanding, my board members are going to have to pay out of their pocket to explain what they've done right to start with. So I'm just asking if you would please just give us some time to show you that we have made these corrections, see our side of it without them having to pay out of pocket to do it. That's all I got. You got questions, I'll answer them.
We allowed authorized to?
Sure.
I'm a manager at a medium-sized utility district too, Mr. Harris. Just for my understanding, can you tell me a little bit about your normal daily operations, what license you have, what size plant, how many tanks, et cetera?
Anthony, if you wouldn't mind
Sorry.
restating that, but just into the microphone, please.
Sorry about that, Ross. Mr. Harris, once again, I'm Anthony Pelham. I manage Warren County Utility District. We're about 9,000 customers. And just for my benefit, would you give a little bit of experience? You said that the current field staff is you and two brothers that does all the work that you've just described. But would you kind of give me a background on your system? You talked about exceptional water loss. That's very good, things that y'all worked on. But
yes,
would you give a little bit of background on that and your licensure and experience?
When we took over, I started there when I was with my dad. And
you've worked at WIT since 12?
Well, when I got out of school, I'd get out of school at 9. And I mean, anybody that knew me knew that. I mean, I made my first water tap with a generator and electric drill shutting a pipe off. We didn't have a tapping. And so Jack Fallbush, I guess some of y'all may remember him, loaned us a tapping tool from Russellville, Wattsburg. But we now have got our water treatment plant. We produce 400,000, 450, 460 a day. It can be up to a 8 to 10 million a day plant. We just have to add more filters and change the pumps, the intake, and all that's in place. When we took over the city of Bainbury, they were kind of in the same situation that East Scud was in, and nobody would put their license on the line. So I got special permission from TDEC at 17 years old to get my grade 2 water treatment license. And then when I was in my early 30s, I took my 3 and then took my 4 and made a 69.7, but I had to leave an hour and a half early to go back and fix a water leak. So I still missed an hour of the test and made a 69. So I just never pursued getting my 4. We provide all the water to exit 8. We also do industrial fire flow. Can provide industrial fire flow. I think 8 hours we can stay at 2,800 a minute, 150, 160 PSI. My cost of production, 64 cents, 169, 170 with depreciation, I think. And we owe about 3.5 million or 3.2 million. We added another line of credit, we did another loan for the in anticipation for the ARPA money that we were going to get for Hamlin County that we've not received. So right now, we're whatever the 3.3, 1.2, whatever, that's what we've got in debt. We've added 200, more customers. Our tap sales have doubled. And then us taking on East Scud, I added another secretary. I do have some part-time like high school to help us, during the summer mow and weed eat, read meters and stuff. We do manual read meters because I like boots on the ground. I like my guys going to a meter every day, every week or month, seeing it. Because it's just not justifiable for us to have digital read meters. Now, in East Scud's situation, we had found proof, and I've been working with Ross in his office about, that we know that they've not read meters accurately. They've not even turned the computer on in 7 months, and so they are right. They've not had bills. We found I don't know how many connections at East Scud that's just direct tapped off the main. The reason we've not been able to develop a contract is because where do you start? It's like planning a wedding. 100 people may show up, but 1,000. So I can't honestly give them a number to charge them a monthly, bill to manage their system. And so I do know that Jerry Hayes worked with TDEC to reach out to the neighboring utilities. There are emails to confirm what he asked, and no, it wasn't just a well. He has the emails to confirm what he asked. So I'll let him get into that. But about asking other utilities to help. The reason that we came in early to help TDEC or to help East Scud was they had a main break, and that was right when Alliance was going out. And TDEC had asked us to come fix an 8-inch line. So to kind of give you the kind of degree of a mess they had, within 260, 280 feet of 8-inch main, there was 27 repair couplings that I could see stripped off. That's how many, they just didn't pack, they never replaced anything.
And I truly want to commend you for the work, from the things that you've said for East Good. For that, I guess I'm thinking back to this board's responsibility to deal with the board members, potentially that's before this board right now. But you said you've worked there since you were 12. And I'm thinking about the things that are leveled here. Did you used to fill out a timesheet that was?
I was always an hourly employee.
Always an hourly employee?
I was before. And then when Dad passed away, when I did Dad's job and my job both. So if you combine those salaries, it's still cheaper than because I was doing both jobs. And so I was hourly. And then in January, we voted to start to go into Chestnut Hill and do that. So the board really had no idea of what salary to do because they wanted us to make sure that they compensated me for what I did. But when they realized that my workload and what I was doing is when we voted to do.
And I appreciate that if you're trying to fill the role of two jobs. Did it ever occur that maybe the board or that y'all would solicit to hire someone else if it was just you and your brothers, that you'd bring on other qualified staff or trained staff? And then two, if you filled out timesheets before and then you ascended that position where you were doing two jobs, why did you stop filling out timesheets so that there was a record to justify the overtime?
We never did timesheets. We punched a time clock is how we always did that. So instead of driving all the way back to the office, no matter where I was, I went through my time and wrote every hour down that we worked every week. And the board and I did. They knew what I was working. They knew what I was doing. So every month, they knew what hours I did. They saw what I was doing to achieve that because we were working with Merkle Brothers during that time to help us with the 10 miles of pipe we were doing. So when I would leave the job site, I would write out my time of that's how we did that at the time. And so working with Rutherford Moss, we're like, we've got to get this on salary.
So there was documentation for the overtime hours that you had?
Yes, I went with my secretary every week. I would tell her every week, this is my time. This is what I worked every day. And she would do she would do it when she did payroll. So every week we went over payroll with me and all my employees, but we never did time sheets.
And the board was aware of that overtime and they approved it either on whatever pay schedule.
Yeah, they knew because they knew what we were doing during that time. And we realized, we knew, found out when we started working with Rutherford Moss that I needed to be on salary. But, we were doing so much and we had so much growth. I mean, it was wide open 7 days a week for us during that time.
To me, that's where I would ask, as a challenge and say, if you had that level of growth and you had lost a manager and you were sending up to multiple positions and you were working that many hours, at some point, did you or the board not step back and say, hey, we need more people. Let's hire to backfill those vacated positions. And then in doing so, you mentioned before that your water loss was already pretty low. Your system was in pretty good shape. Why was there that level of working past normal working hours to accomplish? I mean, was it a time sensitive goal that you had to get it done in that time period?
The area the roughly 10-mile span that we did in that area was a one-way feed. And the reason that we were in such a rush to do that pipe because at Sulphur Springs and Fernwood intersection, the pipe had broke and it was leaking under a bridge culvert. So we started laying in two different directions with two crews because if we lost that feed, I lost 300 and something taps. That's why we were in such a hurry to get it connected in that area. That was the rush during that time. So when we were working with them and working with trying to get ahead of the ARPA funding to be able to submit for our Chestnut Hill project for the regionalism and all the other grants that we did. And so as far as trying to get help, I mean, you also got to think that was during COVID. And we couldn't hardly get anything. I mean, I barely could get a kid from high school to work. So it wasn't that easy to go say, I need a guy to do this. We just had so much going on. It's not easy to find really good quality help. So even with the high school
Disagree
kids.
with that. I mean, I think there's a lot of good, capable workers out there from farm hands. I mean, I know I live down in the nursery capital world, and one of the best folks I've got. They've dug a lot of balls. They've grown up on skid steers, been on tractors their whole life, milked cows, hauled hay, and those things. But I guess you said you're in a hurry to fix a leak, but your water loss wasn't that bad. But then it's an 8-month period of excessive overtime, from my estimation, and so those seems to kind of contradict each other a little bit when you're saying couldn't get help, you lost somebody and you were shorthanded. That's where I'm trying to understand that one particular item. With respect to some of the other allegations, I'll just ask a couple of questions that jump out to me. Did the board authorize your personal use of the vehicles and the utility equipment?
The utility equipment was never used. That Bobcat was delivered by accident from We had bought a new Bobcat. That work that was done was when I was on salary on my own time. I have a company truck that I keep with me because I'm on call 24/7. I have been since the day my father passed away.
Me too.
I mean, we all, so I have a company truck I keep with me all the time. That Bobcat was a new machine we had purchased in May, but didn't arrive till late November, sometime in November. I had rented my own machine with my own money, and I called to return it. I said, I don't need it anymore. The Bobcat company made a mistake and thought that we were done with it. I was done with it and got my name confused because it was with WIT. And they're even writing a statement. Even the owner of the company has said and wrote a letter saying that Bobcat was not used there. And so I sent my brother to get it because they had put it to the wrong place. He had to go to Consolidated Pipe to get some parts, and I said, pick it up. When he was there, the guy there asked him, could you move a pallet for me? He moved it. He never got paid for it. None of us did. So I did not make any money with that machine. That is not true. No. And I've got several people willing to.
I want to make sure I understand that. So Bobcat made a mistake in delivering WIT's machine to a private job that you and your brother were working on in Knoxville. WIT's machine was never used in private service.
No.
And you had rented a Bobcat machine for that job. So there were 2 Bobcats on the site at
No, I was done with the one that I had rented. Bobcat that I had rented, I was done. I called them and said, come get it. But because my name is with WIT Utility, he thought that I was done. He got confused. It was just an accident. It was never ordered there on purpose. It was never supposed to be delivered there.
So they brought the new WIT machine to the site
and loaded it. And by the time I got there, I realized that I said, no, that machine don't go there, but they had the other one on the float and they were leaving. So that was never supposed to be. It was never intentionally delivered there.
I'm curious about if you're that covered up at work, I'm just curious as to how you're running a private business as well and doing jobs on the side.
That was done after I became salary. When things slowed down, we got everything for the PER and everything that we had done. That was all completed. And so after I became salary in late November, December, when I became salary before that, I only bid that work. I let a partner of mine did the work. I just bid it. I wasn't out there on the job site working every day.
You tell me what type of meters East Scud had in place before that you removed the 300 meters?
They had they were old, I think, Badger meters. What had happened was the laptop that they had to read them, the software had been erased and the computer was like 12 years old. So and I'm not a computer guy, so don't quote me on any of this, but the way we understand it with PDS consultants, we had one of the old employees from Alliance lived on the mountain, volunteer to help read, because we don't do digital, those type of meters. So he went around and read them, and then we went to try to download them in the computer, and we couldn't get them to download. And that's when we had a computer person come in, and we worked with whoever that rep is, and they had figured out that the software had been erased, and the amount of money it was going to cost us to replace the software and the meters to update, because they had different types of radio reads, newer and old. So the amount of money it was going to cost us to have to redo all that, it was cheaper to do manual read meters. And because their water loss is so bad and half the meters we can't even find, I wanted guys going there every month reading them so we could kind of evaluate, because their water is so critical.
So y'all did talk to Badger though about trying to fix the problem?
We talked to, I guess it was C.I. Thornburg, maybe.
They don't represent Badger, I don't think.
It may have been, I can't remember the specific brand, but we saved all.
I've got Badger meters in my
Too.
too, but too, I mean, Badger, you can read them. I mean, ours have an analog or a digital screen. You can read them without having a computer. You can physically go read them. And so I don't know why you would be looking at changing meters, even if you didn't have
Because the type of billing software, the way.
I'm saying, no, you could manually read a digital Badger meter just walk up
Right.
with the lid on it. So I don't know.
The way they had set up their MuniLink system, which was their billing software, the way from what we've been told by the computer people that we had hired, couldn't manually enter. Like, so we manually enter every one of our meters. The way they had it to download them, because part of the system had been erased, the amount of money it was going to cost us. And the way that our water loss was, we had to start somewhere to be able to start to bill.
And I understand that. I mean, that's what we read them and download them, and now it's cloud-based. And that's a little issue I have with Badger on the cloud-based meter reading, because you have per reading fee now, right? It's fee-based. But if you wanted to just manually read it and document it and key it in, you could still manually read every one of those meters. So I'm curious why you said you changed out 200 and something meters?
Changed out most of all their meters. There's a few that we've not.
Did you look at them and you weren't able to physically see the faces of them, or you couldn't read them manually if you just went by and left them?
Some of them were bad. Yes, some of them were that you couldn't see, but we don't have any like documentation that they've not been read. And they hadn't been read in over 7 months. They'd been estimated. See, they never actually read the meters. See what I'm saying? So I wanted to start somewhere completely new where we had something to start with, because we don't have any payables. That's all. None of that was there. So we have no, I mean, you can't do a rate study if you don't have data.
200 meters though. I mean, a normal manual meter reader, even if it's walking them between 2 to 4, maybe 500 if they were close together. I mean, if you wasn't sure, you could go do a manual read, take a date in a notepad and go do it longhand. I mean, how do you read them now with manual? You go by and you got a keypad, or you got like a module or a handheld?
We were actually handwrite ours. That we still do ours.
And you couldn't do that with the meters that were there?
Could we not? I'm sure we could, yes, but with the water loss the way it is and trying to get every penny of revenue that we could, I mean, that's why we did what we did for East Scud.
You tell me what type of information you provide your board every month in a board packet? What all does your board see and oversee? I mean, checks paid, signatures, accounts payable, work orders. What all does your board get in a board packet on a monthly basis that they review for oversight?
They have everything that's spent, everything that's spent out that's been spent for that month, every penny that's came.
Every check written, do they see that?
Check.
Yeah, every check that, and do you have 2 signatures on your checks? Who are those signatories?
Me, Terry Sellers, and Christopher.
Board members aren't check signatures?
One of them is, yes. Mike Rouse, I think, is too. Yeah.
And then what type of information are you providing East Scud on a monthly basis, their board? I mean, what I heard today was you're doing everything from accounts receivable. So you're managing the revenue, the water meters billed. So what are you providing them on a monthly basis so they see cash in, cash out, checks written, and who's signing those checks? And
so I finally got a hold of their books where we actually had access to bank accounts to do the ACH payments and all that in April. So we still don't have all of their books. We're finding that they have what little bit they get to see. They see like what we've paid out for that month. And we've been trying to go vendor to vendor. That was a mess they were left in. Was they had owed some vendors over $100,000 that hadn't been paid for quite some time. So we've still been trying to get a grip on what's owed, where the money went. I mean, it's a mess. I have no payables. The only way we're able to find what was, these vendors were owed was I went to old board packets and saw old vendor names, and we just started going vendor to vendor calling because we don't have a single box of payables anywhere.
Well, it did not occur. I mean, to me, I would think day one, yourself and the new board member, and I'd hope East Scud would do this, know where your banks and where your money is, and you go there and sit down with that bank president and say, give me a 2-year canceled check registry and recreate the dollars that have come in and gone out from deposits and expenditures.
So the way that First Horizon, and you'll have to get with Dan Barnett and them to explain it to us, when Alliance had their name on it, they would not give us their code back. Anything that, so only thing we had was what they had in their board packet. I could not go back in their previous stuff because I didn't have access to their bank accounts then. The only thing that I have access to their bank accounts is what I have since they changed the signature cards.
So
That's been a frustrating mess.
How much revenue are you generating a month from East Scud?
They've got about 83 to 86 coming in a month. I found that there's a bunch of kind of the problem that they had, instead of, like, you know, for all of us, if somebody wants a water tap or sewer tap, I guess for some of y'all, you pay up front. Well, they've let contractors get out 60, 80, $90,000 and done all this work for them. And there's not a single work order to show where it went, what subdivision. So there's a lot of revenue out there that still can be collected. I found close to 200 and something sewer, like sewer plant sites. They're not even paying bills. I mean, they're not even in, they've never been in the system. So they're still probably, you could probably get 120, 130 in revenue right now that's just not even been found yet. I mean, because, and that's what's so frustrating, is literally having to go door to door and find, is this a 5-bedroom home, a 4-bedroom home? Because there's no paperwork. I mean, it's like the utility never existed almost. It's frustrating.
Did y'all consider, and I know it was suggested because I suggested it, that y'all engage Melanie Sands with TAUD, because she rebuilds these systems from the ground up and has done it multiple times after we've taken action. So did you all ever consider engaging her to help do this, since she's an expert in this field?
I've never been contacted by anybody.
Well, I wouldn't contact you because you're not East Scud, but since we're discussing East Scud, I'll assure you East Scud was told about that, because I told them.
They've not told that to me. No.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of.
I want to go back and just clarify a question that I'd asked you before. You said you'd worked at WIT for a long time when your father was a manager, you and your brothers. And I want to clarify one point, because it's something that I guess it was a big question to me. Obviously, I thought it was a decimal, maybe a typo with the overtime. Obviously, I've stated that. But you filled out time cards, and there are time cards that substantiate all of those things where you filled in the hours, and then either yourself or the board was aware of all that and they paid that.
They knew what my time was every month, yes.
And they approved that on a monthly basis?
Yes, they knew what my time was based on what we had done and what we were working with McIndoe on the East Scud or not the East Scud, but the Chestnut Hill project. When I spoke in front of the Senate and all that, trying to get all that to grant money and things, and then also doing the pipeline expansion that we had with the grant dollars we knew we were getting from Hamlin County. So 2 separate projects going on at the same time.
And with that level of work in that time frame, and certainly all know we've been through COVID with that, no contractors in that area of East Tennessee that could either truncate that timetable, offset the overtime, or hire additional people.
We worked with Merkle Brothers Construction for 8 or 10 months. We were working together, doing it together. We had 3 prices. We contacted 3 different construction companies and asked for an hourly, a daily rate to help us offset what we were doing. Yes.
At some point in that period, and you see kind of where that budget is kind of going along, were there discussions between yourself and the board of, hey, we look like we're behind. We know we've had the audit finding that was referenced the previous year with the reconciliation. I mean, do y'all discuss the P&L statements on a monthly basis if you're starting to get skewed from budget?
Yes, but if you add up our time, even with my overtime was still cheaper, it still saved the district money with what they were paying me and my father, and then I still did more work. I mean, I guess I'm missing, I did more work than what we were doing when he was there because of all the things that we've been hit with. And yes, I had a lot of overtime, but it still saved the district money.
I think we're talking project internal controls more than we are your work. It's the board's responsibility to oversee your work. That's what we're discussing.
Okay, so what work are you saying?
So did the board not, if you at some point asked, hey, I need help, or the board said, hey, we're working you too hard, if nothing else, that they just care about you and say, hey, we're running you in the ground? Was there ever a suggestion that we need some assistance, or, hey, go get somebody to help us.
That's why we hired Merkel and we hired some other part-time people, to help us to do it. But I mean, I enjoy what I do. I mean, it's not running me in the ground. I mean, it's something I enjoy doing.
How much money would you estimate that it's cost the WIT utility customers for your time and investment in these SCUD?
We've actually made money off what we've done from them.
And going back to those meters, typically with the Badger meter, they have in their serial number, they have the year that meter was manufactured. How old would you estimate those meters to have been?
I don't know. I've not looked at the serial numbers. I don't know.
What would you estimate your time as far as the difference between serving or working on the WIT utility side versus the East Severe side? How would you estimate the two time differences?
What am I doing now with that's like all of our staff? We've scaled back since the comptroller report till we could come up with like a instead of because they are limited on funds. I probably go up there maybe twice a week now, unless we have leaks or we're fixing problems or whatever. So a lot of the guys are volunteering, and I chose to pull back at the last meeting for us not to do anything with them till we could get a contract in writing. So I volunteered my water treatment license, and I volunteered to help them until we could get this kind of together and get a contract in place. So I would say right now I might be spending most of it is what time I spend.
With respect to at least the one allegation of the charge with the roof project, would you care to make any comment that if that's not inappropriate to ask?
It's not inappropriate to ask, but because of the criminal allegations against me, my lawyers told me not to speak because it could hurt me in court.
With respect then to the board, did the board approve all expenditures for material and contractor in regards to the roof for the building?
Yes, we had three prices. We took the cheapest price. We bought the shingles from Wallace Hardware, which is a 50-year shingle, and it was cheaper for buying them from Lowe's or Home Depot. At that time, Home Depot, and then we're out. They were running out of, but we could buy them wholesale cheaper. So yes.
Who determines the amount of shingles to buy? I think the one gentleman spoke about the various sizes. Who determined the number of shingles to buy and how much for the scope of work with it?
We had the roofing company come out, and I showed them the different buildings that we had, and I measured the other pump stations where the extra shingles were bought to go. So they measured the office. I think they got a drone or whatever that they use. So the roofing company told us what we needed with waste and in regards to that. And I think that's bids, or not bids, but quotes.
I've got one final question. There was a mention earlier by Mr. Hayes that you all met at his house and had food and discussed, I guess, how to move forward. Can you just tell me who was at that meeting, please?
The reason the meetings were, they had a community meeting for help because they had been out of water back at that time for sometimes weeks on end. So when Jerry and all them and Mr. Cooley and all them came to our office, there were lots of people of community. Louie and Heather that were always there. Ron Cooley was always there. Ron Mitchell, Jerry, Trish, Charles.
Sure. I was just curious if there were decisions and discussions made there, and Mr. Branstetter may just want to speak to that, whether or not the sunshine law was violated. It was just something that triggered in me.
They weren't even board members.
Okay, that's why I was asking the question for clarification. Again, that's why I'm asking for clarification. I had no idea when that meeting took place.
No, that was over close to a year ago. And the reason that they had got together as a community, and they, I think, had reached out to Ross, and I had spoke with Ross and even showed, I think, the comptroller's office and delivered where I thought the fraud was going on just based on their audits. And so I'd worked with Ross and them and that, but that was a community coming together asking how because they just never were getting anywhere with the old board and Alliance. So no, this was all happened way before that.
Cool, thanks.
And I know maybe it's me just.
This is
getting-
Kevin Botts.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so I would like to know why has it taken so long to have all of the legal matters in place between the two utility districts? And is this not something that your board would have involvement in to usher this forward?
If I can address that. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. If I can address that, I'm Dewey Branstetter. I'm Witt's lawyer. I think I understand your question about the contract and what has happened. TDEC asked Witt to assist eScud originally in January of 22, so well over a year ago, when they didn't have any power, and TDEC called and said, "Can you bring a generator up here?" It was after a snowstorm on English Mountain. So that's how Witt first really became aware of East Sevier Utility District. Then in March, they were having problems. February, March, they had a new board that had come in January. So I prepared on behalf of Witt kind of an emergency work contract of what Witt could do to assist eScud. It was approved by both boards, and Witt went in and did that work with a lot of assistance from TDEC. Then more recently, just within the last few weeks, we have been trying to come up with terms for an actual continuation contract. But the problem is there have been so many issues at eScud trying to figure out finances, equipment, where their lines were, why customers were not being billed, what individuals or entities were owed money, that it was almost impossible to sit down and say, okay, this is what needs to be done for a particular price. I had drafted several weeks ago sort of a form contract, actually an intergovernmental agreement, which is what it would be under the Interlocal Cooperation Act, between WIT and eScud. But it's been difficult to say, okay, this is what needs to be done and this is what it will cost until more information about what was going on at eScud could be derived. So if I'm addressing your question about why there's not currently a contract in place, that's the reason. If it may be possible to do that now, but it's still problematic to come up with terms of what exactly needs to be done when they're still trying to figure out exactly what some of the, they haven't run all the traps yet. They have sewer customers that haven't been billed. They have sewer equipment that they don't know if it's working or not. And much of that was really beyond the initial scope of why TDEC asked WIT to help. And I want to clarify too, the new chairman of eScud's board did go to a number of different cities and utilities in the area with a list of requirements for help that they needed that had been prepared by the TDEC office, and no one but WIT was willing to provide that assistance. And part of that is because, well, Mr. Cooley, you may disagree, but I've seen the emails. And part of the reason why WIT could be a help is you heard Mr. Harris say, they do all their own work. They understand how to fix pipes and how to locate things. You couldn't just send an engineering company or a contractor up there without any knowledge of that system. But Mr. Harris had gained an understanding of that system. So anyway, that's probably more than you wanted to hear. But if I haven't answered your question, let me know and I'll try to respond as best I can.
Thank you. You do, or you have answered my question. For my own clarification, the initial emergency legal document that you created between the two utility companies, was that an open-ended document, or was there a temporary end date that has been extended? How was that? I have not seen that document.
Yeah, there was not an end date on it. It just called for certain things for a certain dollar amount. And then if there were additional things, the board at Eastgood would have to approve that. So that contract is still there. But what WIT has been trying to do lately is figure out what else needs to be done for a subsequent agreement that'll need to be a lot more detailed. And as I say, you know, we've got a template of an intergovernmental agreement between WIT and Eastgood. I have spoken with with Eastgood's attorneys. They approved the first contract. We prepared something, sent it to them. They made some changes. We negotiated it. The one that's currently still, I guess, still in effect. And then that was approved by both boards. And I can't tell you the exact day, but it was approved by both boards.
So considering all the unknowns, was there any consideration just to doing like a fully burdened labor rate and then a rate for the equipment? And so it's 120, I'm making this up, but it's $117 an hour fully burdened, and that's what you bill per hour. And then Eastgood's and WIT's boards approve those invoices.
I think that may be exactly where it ends up. In fact, that's what Mr. Harrison and I have been talking about. Now, I see Mr. Overby, who is Eastgood's attorney on the screen, who's been delightful to work with. We've not presented anything to him yet, but trying to get arms around what is an appropriate amount to charge that's fair to the WIT utility district, but also fair to the Eastgood utility district. It's just been difficult, and you've heard they've had a lot of problems. They had a brand new board that came in January, and it's been what 8-10 weeks that WIT has actually been there, sort of on site, trying to help them.
So one other, I'm sorry, I had a brain. How's WIT being compensated now?
So the first, I didn't finish what I was saying a while ago, and I think it would probably clarify. The work that was originally done when they were out of water 15
Could you
days,
please speak up?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay, sorry. The first thing we did, TDEC had asked us, could we help them fix an 8-inch line break to get water in the system? And so that was the first thing I did, was for 2 or 3 days, fix their main leak to start getting water in the system. Then the board had kind of said, we kind of talked about how much money would it take and what would it take to stabilize it, to stop the bleeding, to kind of just take a break, just so we just had a place to start. So we came up with an amount of what it would take, and based on what we had found and what I'd found in the system. So they have paid for that. And then the extra things that we've done, like mentioning the pump house and replumbing some of the wells, all of that for the first contract that we agreed on, we have been paid for in full. That agreement has been satisfied of our original first agreement of what we would charge.
What was that number?
Is 110,000. And then I think there was like 70, I think it was 180 total for everything that we did, extra work and all.
And the contract called for, if there was extra work, the board would have to approve it before it would be paid.
And that was approved.
I have one other roofing question to go back to clarify, and then I don't know if you were going to make a statement, or I had a couple of questions that you may address. With respect to the roof, Mr. Harris, I just wanted to make sure I understood if I wrote down my notes correctly. You said that you or WIT did not specify the scope or the size. You carried the contractors out to see the sizes of the buildings, and they measured them, and somebody used a drone to give you the size of those buildings.
On the WIT's office and the fueling station, the other pump stations that we had, the small pump stations, I measured those.
So did all three contractors go out separately and see them if you didn't give them the total footprint?
The only thing they priced was the work that they did at the utility itself. The scope of work we had that they did, and you can see in the doc, it was just the WIT office and fuel building. They were never supposed to do any other buildings. So the work that we paid for was for the WIT office and fuel station. The extra shingles that we purchased was for the other pump stations that we weren't ready to do, but we bought them all at once at the same time.
And they're
from all
still
turbines.
inventory at with.
That's what the rest of what we've got to talk about with our attorneys.
That's part of what Ben has been accused of, and I'm not his criminal attorney, but
And I'm not, once again,
they've called me a
for this
criminal
board's
before.
not the criminal or even ESCUD. It's,
Yeah.
to me, I'm asking that to try to understand at what point did the utility board for WIT have adequate oversight for a project? And so if, if it's not job shopping, or if three people had a clear competitive scope that they were working to compare apples to apples on a bid, obviously there's advantages for a utility that we can buy products that are tax exempt, right? We're able to buy things to do that for the benefit of our customers. When we do that, it's a matter to me on, did all three of them have an equal playing field to be able to make that judgment? Because you said you got three quotes and then y'all chose the cheapest one and then
Yes.
proved that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And one thing on that, Mr. Pelham, so in our report, and I misspoke earlier, I want to clarify because I found this sentence in the report. One of the findings in our report is the district paid approximately $44,717 for a new roof and gutters for the district office and fueling station without soliciting competitive sealed bid. So earlier you asked about the bidding, and I spoke it seems like they got quotes, but they did not get competitive sealed bids for those projects.
And I have a couple of questions about some of the board members, but they may be answered if Dewey was going to make a.
Yeah, I think now is probably appropriate for Dewey to
I
make some
remember,
comments and we can go.
I'll answer some of the questions, then I'm happy to. And as y'all know, I'm Dewey Branstetter from Schwarbro firm here in Nashville, and I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to appear before you and express some of these concerns. I've represented WIT for a number of years. I see my former law partner of over 25 years, Don Scholes here. He had done work for WIT when we were law partners. And some of you knew my father, Cecil, who also did work for WIT for a number of years. So our history with WIT goes back a ways. All three commissioners of the district are here, the chairman, Mike Rouse, the other two board members, Michael Fagan and Terry Sellers. If I were in your shoes and all I saw was the report that you've been presented, or if I had been just told about the information in this report, then I would probably be inclined to do exactly what the staff recommendation is. But if all you've heard about is the staff summary and the report, there's a lot more to it that you just simply don't know. So what I want to do today, and I've talked with Mr. Colonna about this, he knows, no surprises. I'm asking you to postpone taking any action today. You or the TBOR, I'm going to have to get used to saying TBOR, not UMRB. It can address this at a later date. And let me explain why I'm asking this and why I think it is an appropriate request. The comptroller's report was issued, it's not even been a month yet. And my client really hasn't had an opportunity to respond to all the allegations. And we need time to prepare a response. And we want to meet with Mr. Colonna in the comptroller's office. And that's only fair because the WIT board, and particularly Mr. Harris, have been accused of some very serious allegations. And I think we should have a right to get with them and respond to some of those allegations. And particularly on the criminal charges, all they are at this point, they're allegations. Mr. Harris and his brother are innocent until proven guilty. I'm not asking you to never institute a contested case over this. You may decide to do that, but I'm asking you to postpone any decision from today. Because I sincerely believe that once we sit down with the comptroller's office and go through point by point some of the issues in the report, I think the staff recommendation will not be to do the most severe sanction available, which is to oust all three board members. There may be findings, there may be recommendations, but my opinion is once we've had an opportunity to really sit down, not in an investigative situation like the comptroller's office was doing before, but with the report now and with our information and have an opportunity to say, this is our response to certain of these allegations. I know we aren't here today to really address point by point the allegations, but there are a few things that I know are of concern to y'all that I want to address. And I'll try to be brief, but I hope you'll indulge me because this is a serious matter. And postponing a decision, not taking action today, it's not.
I don't mean to interrupt you. We just had a problem with the recording because the meeting is about to end. So if you give me 1 second.
Sure.
I need to get that started back. So is the meeting still going right now?
We're still live here, Ross. This is Kevin.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Kevin. Everyone just hold tight. I should just be able to extend it from here. We're going to keep going. I don't think the recording's going to stop. And if it does, I might have to pause you again and we'll figure it out.
I'm hoping it is being recorded.
Yeah, it's on a Teams, and so it's all being recorded.
If we'd ever need it or not.
I apologize for interrupting you, Dewey.
Anyway, I hope when I go through this information that you'll understand why I think the fair thing to do and the right thing to do is to not take action today. And I want to start with one of the first concerns that was listed in the staff recommendation that WIT canceled its regular meeting on June the 8th. To our knowledge, no one has asked why that meeting was moved from June the 8th, but it was reassured, it was rescheduled just 5 days later on June the 13th for very legitimate reasons. And the staff summary also says on the first page that board staff is not aware of any actions taken to remedy the failure of internal controls. Well, because no one from the comptroller's office was at that June 13 meeting that the WIT board had. All three commissioners were present. And again, that was the first meeting that they've had since the report was issued on May 17th. The comptroller's office could not know what actually occurred at that meeting. The first thing that the WIT board did is they voted to hire an independent accounting firm to review the May 17 report and then work with WIT to address the issues raised in that report. Part of the reason is because we think there's some inaccuracies in the report, and WIT wanted an entity with extensive governmental experience and accounting experience that has had no prior connection with the WIT utility district to examine it, help them formulate a response, help them address deficiencies that exist from an accounting standpoint, and if there were problems, to implement a specific plan to address those problems. And again, it was decided that having an entity with no prior connection with WIT would be the most appropriate thing to do, so it would be independent. And frankly, it's just a better look to bring somebody in that can say, we're new to this, we have no connection with WIT, we're new to them. And that process is going to take a little bit of time. And that would be a reason that we think it would be appropriate to defer action. I also should point out, because it's come up in conversation, that in June of last year, June of 22, actually June 9th, so exactly 53 weeks ago, the WIT board voted to hire the Knoxville office of the accounting firm Rutherford Moss to help them with accounting issues and issues that had been raised in previous audits. Rutherford Moss was hired to help them address internal controls, to help reconcile the books in a timely way, and to provide the kind of general accounting advice that Crane Thompson, WIT's auditors, can't do because they're limited in their audit function. They can only do certain things. And also to help WIT close its books timely. I want to mention the reason the audit hasn't been finished yet is through no fault of the WIT Utility Board or Ben Harris or anyone else. It's because the books and records were taken as part of the investigation, have yet to be returned, so the audit can't be completed. Rutherford Moss does not have access to those records, nor does Crane Thompson. So to the extent that there's a feeling that, well, these guys have just not done their audit, it is through no fault of the Board of Commissioners that the audit has not yet been completed. So anyway, at this meeting that occurred 3-4 days ago now, the WIT board voted to hire MG Accounting Group, which has offices in Middle Tennessee, and which is an experienced governmental auditing firm, to come in and help them. The board also discussed at that meeting, working with me, their counsel, to respond to the May 17 report and help the board take action to address the deficiencies that have been alleged. Unfortunately, I was not able to go to the board meeting this past Tuesday in Morristown. I had a previously long scheduled another utility district that was having a significant issue with that they needed my advice on, so I was not able to go to that meeting. And if the meeting had occurred at the irregularly scheduled day on June 8th, I couldn't have gone to that one either because I had another board meeting that I needed to attend. So I want to be clear that the WIT board has not ignored this report. They have taken affirmative steps to address the concerns and will be addressing the concerns and want an opportunity to sit down with the comptroller and go through point by point with a response to the allegations. I also need to respond to this paragraph, which is on page 2 of the staff report. And this is what it says. It says, WIT has not provided UMRB staff with documentation that it has adopted or amended its policies or made personnel changes to prevent or limit future bad acts since the release of the May 17, 2023 investigative report. UMRB staff is unaware of the board having considered or discussed the possibility of such changes at any of its properly noticed meetings. Well, that may be a partially true statement, but remember, this report was just issued less than a month ago. And that statement ignores what the board did at its meeting this past Tuesday. And what it also doesn't tell you is that literally the day the report came out, I had conversations with the board chairman, Mr. Rouse, about getting with the board and addressing these issues. Since then, I've had numerous conversations with him. I've also had numerous conversations with Mr. Harris. And as soon as we can get together and do that, we will. But given my workload over the past 4 weeks, that has simply not been possible. That is not the WIT board's fault. I mean, I'm fortunate that I'm busy, but that is not their fault that I've not been able to get with them and do it. And I'm very confident telling you, with the 3 board members here today, when this meeting's over, we're going to pull out our calendars and we're going to schedule a time to meet, or actually we'll probably schedule more than one time to meet so I can get with them and we can address the report. If 60 or 90 days had passed, I would certainly understand the concern. Again, it's been less than 30 days. The last point I want to address is one that I know is of great concern to you members of the board because you've raised it today. And that's the issue of the overtime. And if I were in your shoes, I would certainly understand if I just saw on paper that somebody had $67,000 worth of overtime. And it would give me concern, but indulge me and let me explain how that came about, how the board was aware of it, and the action that the board took related to that. And again, all these are facts that the comptroller's office was not aware of, but that we certainly will sit down and make them aware of. And I think it's the type of information that needs to be shared with the comptroller before recommendation is made to institute a contested case. So here's kind of the background. Well, here's the background. Terry Harris was the general manager of WIT Utility for decades, I think 27 years. Ben Harris was appointed general manager in mid-January of 2021, just a little over 2 years ago, because his father, Terry, died unexpectedly of COVID. He passed away on January 8, 2021. He was just 61 years old. Ben Harris had been the field superintendent of WIT for years, but as you heard him say, he grew up with the WIT Utility District. He started working there when he was 12 years old, got his operator's license with the special dispensation from TDEC when he was 17. So he became general manager just a few weeks after his father passed away. Now, prior to Terry Harris's death, when Terry Harris was the general manager, the district had a total of 7 full-time employees. And I heard, I think Mr. Pelham say he has 21 and Mr. Giles say that they've got 29 employees. Yes, Witt is a significantly smaller district, but it had 7 full-time employees. Terry Harris was the general manager. There were 4 employees in the field, including Ben Harris, and there were 2 that worked in the office, 2 office employees. So after Terry Harris died in January of 21, and Ben Harris became the general manager, no additional employees were hired. So then there were 6 full-time employees. There was Mr. Harris, who was Mr. Ben Harris, who became the general manager. There were the 3 other field employees and the 2 people in the office. So 6 full-time employees. So what happened was Mr. Harris, because of Ben Harris, because of his interest in the district, wanted to be the general manager and said, I can do both of these jobs. And to really understand the context of the overtime, let me explain to you how Mr. Harris was paid, how his father was paid before him. And I think it'll become clear that there was not a mismanagement or failure to oversee what was doing. In calendar year 2020, that was the year before Terry Harris passed away, 2020. Terry Harris was paid $77,478 as the general manager of Witt Utility. In that same year, Ben Harris, who was the field superintendent, was paid $53,000. Those 2 salaries totaled in 2020 $131,817, so almost $131,000. In 2021, when Ben Harris was doing all of his father's job duties and still working in the field, he received total pay, including overtime, of $108,000. So by not replacing the general manager, but by Ben Harris taking over his father's duties and continuing to do everything that he was doing, the utility district actually saved $22,000 over what it had paid Ben Harris and Terry Harris the year before when both of them were working. Then in 2022, the district still hadn't added any employees. It had just the 6 full-time employees that I've mentioned. And in 2022, Ben Harris was paid a total of $149,266, and that includes all the overtime in question. And you've heard him say some of the things that they accomplished trying to put together the program to go into Chestnut Hill and the work that was done. But even with that amount of money, he was only paid $18,000 more than he and his father both would have earned had they continued working at the same pay rate based on what Mr. Harris, Terry Harris, and Mr. Ben Harris earned in 2020. And yet you only had one person doing the job of those 2 people. So over the period of time between 2021 and 2022, Ben Harris was actually paid less by about $4,500 than both he and his father would have earned if they had both continued to be doing 2 people doing 2 jobs with one person doing the one job. And in August of 2022, before this investigation even started, the Witt board, which had been monitoring Ben Harris's overtime, made the decision to put him on a salary basis. And this is how that came about. In January of that year, there was discussions about making Ben a salaried employee. But the board said, we don't know what would be a fair amount. So the decision was made, let's see what he does and how much overtime he's working, because he worked some overtime in 2021, and then make a decision. Well, by August, it was apparent Mr. Harrison worked a lot of overtime. So the board, in a proper response, said, we're going to change you from hourly. We're going to make you a salaried employee. And the salary was $125,000. So the salary that they started him at in August of 22, when he went from an hourly employee to a salaried employee, was less than what his father and Ben were being paid 2 years earlier. And during that same 2-year period, inflation rose by over 13.5%, 7% in 2021, 6.5% in 2022. So if you took that $131,000 that Ben and Terry Harris were making in 2020 and applied the inflation factor to it, that would be about $150,000. But they set his salary at $125,000, and it's gone up 5% since then. And you also can't lose sight of the fact that when Ben Harris became the general manager and Terry Harris was no longer with us, there was only one person on the district's insurance. So they saved the district money by only having one person on insurance, which is even more of a savings than what it would have been just based on the salary. So this is what the staff recommendation states on the overtime issue at the bottom of page 1. It says, while this particular issue may have been remedied, it highlights the board's failure to implement proper internal controls to prevent such abuse from occurring, especially in light of its current failure to implement additional controls to prevent similar issues. The board members have a responsibility to be good stewards of public funds so as to prevent such excessive costs from being incurred. I've got to ask you, wasn't the WIT board being a good steward of public funds when it merged those two positions and one person was doing it and saved money over the prior year? And wasn't it being a good steward of funds when it took those two jobs and then paid him less than the two of them would have been making if the two jobs had not been merged into one? And that doesn't even include the medical insurance cost and those savings. And listen, I would venture to say that if Mr. Ben Harris had been put on salary at the 1st of January of 2021 at $125,000, and that's what he was paid, that no one would raise any question about the amount that he earned. Not at all. But because he was working so hard and earning overtime, which again was less than he and his dad were being paid, it certainly, I can see how that would raise a question. This is the type of information we want to sit down with the comptroller and provide, because we've not had an opportunity to do that. And I sincerely believe, and I may be wrong, but I sincerely believe that if we meet with the comptroller staff and go through this type of information, responding to certain things, some of them we have to be careful about because of the pending criminal charges, but go through it, those, I would venture to say that the recommendation will not be to oust all three board members at the next board meeting. And we're asking you to give us that chance before this life-altering decision is made. And it is life-altering if you institute a contested case in this circumstance. And here's why. These board members would have to pay out of their own pocket to defend if they choose to fight and say, no, we don't think we should be removed. And that wouldn't be fair if they haven't even had a chance to sit down with the comptroller in advance. Or they may say, look, I don't have the resources to do it. Time-wise, I don't have the time to do it. So I'm just going to resign. But if they do, you know what's going to be said. Well, the only reason you resign is because you were engaged in all these bad actions. And most people have no idea how time-intensive and expensive a contested case can be. And so even if it was made from the standpoint of an economic decision and a practical decision, and I'm not putting my time and money into fighting this, it's not worth it. It's not fair to put them in that situation at this time. I'm about done.
Okay.
I'm just about done.
You're
I'm
all right.
about to wrap up.
Sure.
So I'm asking that the board take no action today and give us, me, the professionals, the board, an opportunity to sit down with the comptroller's office and respond. No one has questioned that WIT is a well-operated district. This is not a situation where if you don't take some action or start doing something, its customers are going to be without water. No question about that. Their customers, it's a well-operated system. And despite some of the allegations in the report, there's not a penny that anybody can point to and say, this money is missing from the utility district. So there's no immediate harm that something like that's going to happen if you just postpone your decision. So for all these reasons that I've just kind of gone through and hopefully made some sense about, because it's confusing when you start talking about numbers and salaries and overtime and who was making what in insurance. I hope you'll not adopt the comptroller staff's report at this time, but give us a chance to respond. You can always come back at a later date and say, no, we think this board needs to be removed. But if you do it today, the damage can't be undone, but you can always come back and do it at a later date. And again, I let Mr. Colonna know we were going to be asking for this. He may wish to respond. I know I've talked a long time. It's an important matter for my client. I've been doing this 42 years. And my father, Cecil, who many of you knew, practiced for 50 years. And a lot of his time was spent in utility work. If I thought there was something really wrong with the WIT board, I wouldn't be here today. I can assure you of that. Give us an opportunity to sit down with the comptroller before you take this most drastic action. And if the comptroller's not satisfied and they come back at a later date and say, board, please institute a contested case, I may oppose it at that point too, but at least we will have had an opportunity to present our case. So happy to answer any questions anybody has.
So one thing that I would like to add, board, Dewey is correct. I spoke with him. I was very aware of what he was going to bring forth in front of the board today. And so as board staff, I'm not here to say don't go along with what Dewey's suggesting, and I'm not advocating to go along with what Mr. Brandstetter suggested. Ultimately, I think that it should be left up to the board whether to consider anything that Mr. Brandstetter brought forth. So I just want to make it very clear, we're staying neutral on what Mr. Brandstetter brought forth and leave it up to the board to make a decision on whether we should postpone or anything like that. But as of right now, the staff recommendation stays the same as earlier presented.
And I appreciate Ross. He was very upfront with me and said, I'm not going to oppose your recommendation. I'm not going to support your recommendation, but I think it's legitimate for you to present it to the board. And I do appreciate that.
So can I ask, I'm sorry, go ahead.
One of the things that I feel like still hasn't been addressed is the annual training statement from each utility board member and the appropriate compensation during the last 5 years. I've not heard anybody say anything. Have they met that requirement? Has that been done?
To my knowledge, they've met the training requirements. I've not seen the been up there, and I Philip, I just really can't address it. I don't know.
I know that we're required by January 31st of each year to fill out that statement in that form.
Mm-hmm.
And it says that there's nothing that shows that there's anything that can document or show proof that that has been done.
And I can ask and I can look and find that out. We've not gotten into that detail in the report. I will say the question was asked about what benefits they've gotten. None of the commissioners have ever received insurance. That's not ever been a benefit that they have received from the district.
So there was I think a statement, I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit, made that the board was kind of evaluating adding the two positions together to save money. You mentioned saving money multiple times. Yeah. So does that reflect in board meeting minutes during that period of time?
I don't know, because if they didn't if they didn't make that a specific action, it's probably not. But when Mr. Harris died, Terry Harris died, then asked to be made general manager and said, let me do both jobs. And the board agreed to do that.
Right.
And so as a result of that, it has saved the district.
I understand that, but you said they were evaluating that time frame. So how were
Oh,
they
no, they were
evaluating? If there
evaluating
was,
the
I want to know if there were records during those 8 months or whatever period of time that reflects that they were having discussion and evaluating. I think that's kind of the,
What they were evaluating was and again, I think I've got this right. I'm pretty confident, and if I don't, then I will respond and let you know that I was wrong. There was discussion in early 2022, after Ben had been there a full year and after they'd seen, yes, he can do the job, and yes, he's doing a heck of a job, about going ahead and putting him on salary. But the decision was, we don't know exactly what would be an appropriate salary. So the board, and it didn't take a formal vote, because it was just, they were just monitoring it, that they were going to watch and see what he did, how much overtime he had, which was reported to them, as Mr. Harris said, every month. They knew exactly what he was doing and how much overtime he was being paid. Then at the end of the summer, they made a decision, because he had a heck of a lot of overtime, and it was a lot of overtime. But I can assure you, he worked every hour of it. They decided to then put him on salary at $125,000 a year. Again, that was less than, and I think I'm remembering this right, and that if I misspeak, it's not intentional, that one of the board members made a motion based on looking at what he had done and also looking at the combined two salaries of the general manager and the field superintendent, and decided to do it at $125,000 a year.
but
Put him on salary then. And all the work or any work that Mr. Harris has done at Eastgood has been since he was on salary. He's not been paid anything additionally for any work that was done at Eastgood.
Mr. Brandstetter, would you be able to tell me just how long Mr. Rouse, Mr. Fagan, and Mr. Sellers, what year they've been on the board? What kind of experience do they have on the board?
I think Mr. Rouse came on the board in 2015. I think Mr. Fagan came on in 17. And the most recent board member, Mr. Sellers, came on it's been less than a year. So that he came on the board. So they're some experience, but also some fairly new board members too.
And Mr. Harris previously said that all accounts payable or checks that go out to vendors require dual signatures on checks, but only Mr. Rouse, he was the only board member that had signature authority on the accounts. Did I note that correctly?
No.
I'm not sure. I
that
honestly
was the
don't know,
statement
Mr.
that was
Pelley.
made. I made marks there as well.
I would say that one.
I just made a note that when we would ask about who signed the checks, you stated that yourself and there were 2 or 3 other with staff members that normally sign the accounts payable, that are authorized to,
I think
that only Mr. Rouse was the only other signatory.
no, Mr. Rouse, to my knowledge, has not signed any. He's not signed any checks. Terry Sellers can, and Christina Carver and myself. And so if Christina's not there, as last week or this past week, she was on vacation. So Terry signed all the monthly checks, for bills and things like that.
I'm obviously misunderstood earlier. I thought before you said that the board always saw the check register on things that were there, but now they don't sign them. They just see it after it's been done and approved.
They see all they see every check we write, and if it's over in a certain amount, they know what it's for. If it's over 10,000, but every month they have a list of everything that's been paid, what check, where it went. They have a complete list of that. Yes.
It's not general practice that the board is the actual signatory on the checks.
No, we've never done that in 27 years that I know that.
And then a question, Dewey, that you made a comment that I made a note of, just for my own understanding. You'd stated that the comptroller, the reason that the September 30, 2022 audit that's not been reconciled and closed, the reason that it has not closed was because during the investigation, comptroller's office took all of the records, and that was the reason why it was not.
It might have been the
Was
team.
there a reason why there wasn't copies made, or why the master?
They wouldn't give them copies.
Pardon me?
They wouldn't give them copies.
It is our practice during these investigations, especially after investigations have been completed, if there is something that is needed for the audit, usually our investigators are able to work with the personnel to make sure that the auditor can get those records. I have not been made aware, nor do I believe that the reason that the audit is incomplete right now is because we are in possession of records that are preventing the books from being closed.
The other thing is Crane Thompson had contacted the comptroller's office, and because of the investigation, they chose not to go through with the audit yet. And so Rutherford Moss had actually tried to get them to go ahead and move forward, and they refused to until the comptroller's office was complete. They said they didn't want to complete the audit, and we could not make them, we couldn't do that. Now, we were on a September fiscal year, and this past year we voted to go to get on the June cycle. So this year will be a short year. So our fiscal year will be short this month, or this time from September to June, and then we'll go from the June 30th. And we've changed it, we voted to change that.
And one thing that I would like to add regarding the audit is an email that I have from our Division of Local Government Audit, in which they reached out to Crane Thompson and Jones. And our employee said, I learned the following regarding WIT UD's audit status. They attempted to start the audit only to learn records were not fully closed and ready for audit. So the information that we're being provided, that Crane Thompson and Jones is ready and they're willing to do it. However, like the finding that they've had in previous audits, the books aren't being closed. Now, if we want to contend that the books aren't being closed, the books aren't closed because of information we have and aren't giving it to the WIT Utility District. I'm not aware of that, but that's generally not our practice. We don't like to see late audits, nor do we like to be an obstacle.
And that's one of the things that needs to be ferreted out, I think, before you take action, is exactly where had been that deficiency? Because I know Rodiger Moss has helped do the, again, can't do as the auditor. So I want to be real clear that to the extent that you're thinking, well, this board don't supposed to do, that is just simply not the, again, that's the kind of information we need to sit down. Usually, if comptroller's office has material that Rodiger Moss needs to close the books and they don't, then that's on us. But if Rodiger Moss has tried to get it and Crane Thompson has refused to close the audit until do the audit until the to be made aware. Either way, it's not on the WIT.
That's what was said. We had a conference call with Rutherford Moss and me and Sam French. We said, why can we not make them, they've got to do this audit, because we were concerned it could hurt grant funding or anything that we would be applying for. And so I think to clarify all that, Rutherford Moss and Sam French can speak to the fact that Crane Thompson did not want to finish the audit for us, and he tried to get him to do everything except the final. But our books, everything that we had, Rutherford Moss has completed, because they started doing soft closes every quarter. And so all the books and stuff are ready. It was Crane Thompson refusing to do the audit until the comptroller's report. And if that's what they've told Ross, they've lied to Ross. And I don't care a bit to have Sam talk to Ross and verify that is not what happened.
Thanks. Question, Dewey, you had indicated that you were unable to attend the postponed board meeting from June 8th, whatever, to June 13th. But I didn't know if there was any further actions taken other than what I guess I noted, that the board acted to engage an independent accounting firm to review and address all of the items from the investigation.
And help them.
Any other comments or actions to be handled, or is it just to engage them and then wait until the findings from that investigation?
Also discussed, it didn't formal action. As I said, one of the things, my May from hell is over. I had a really rough month of May with just work-wise. Now that that's over, they want me to come up and sit down with them. And what I will probably do, is I've already started working on, is developing some, I think, more detailed policies that they can review and hopefully adopt, that will specifically address some of the concerns in the report. And we absolutely intend to do that. And again, I'm not casting aspersions on on Ross. I might cast aspersions about something else, but I'm not casting them about this. But they just didn't know that the board had met and had these discussions and where it was. No, ignored this report. Literally the day it came out, I was on the phone with Mike Rouse, their board chairman, saying, we got to sit down and go through and start addressing these concerns. And I've had several conversations with him since then. I've had individual conversations. I've not spoken with Mr. Sellers, but I've spoken with Mr. Fagan. Never two board members together so that there would be any question about, the sunshine law, but on conversations. And we will do that and we will address. And at the end of the day, if you don't feel like that we've adequately addressed it or that can't be addressed, then you can implement and start the contested case.
Mr. Branstetter, what is a reasonable amount of time you're asking for? What are you asking for?
I'd say
Next board meeting.
maybe 90. I mean, I don't know how quickly the accounting firm, but I think that's I'm not an accountant. Never took an accounting class. And so I'm not a lot of help on some of the detailed accounting issues, but I understand internal controls and I understand purchasing policies. And I understand policies that boards can implement on use of district vehicles and use of facilities. I can do all that, and that can be done reasonably quickly. I'm still busy, but I absolutely assure you I will make it a priority.
I think that when we engaged with MG Group, I think in their statement that they said they could have their they call it a high risk audit. They could have it completed by September 1st. But if we need to have, before your all's next board meeting in August, August 31st or whatever, I think we could have that done.
And that's what I was going to suggest is that, give us till August 31st, but I don't know whether that meeting will take place or not, or what exactly is going to be the step with this board, going out of existence.
I have a question for board staff. Is there something a notch or two down from a contested case where we bring this up again under T-Board?
I don't think that there's anything a notch or two down. I'm trying to think of any remedies that we would have to.
There's nothing.
We don't
official
do
that's
it.
a notch or two down.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
There's nothing official that's a notch or two down, but the board could just schedule another or request that they schedule another special called meeting, I guess, as soon as T-Board is established, and have an informal presentation answering these questions.
Can we as UMRB tell T-Board to do that?
Yeah,
or
that
leave it open
complicates
task?
the whole thing, the change in state law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a number of you, I'm assuming, are going to be on the new board
No
and
one knows.
can make that recommendation, and we'll consent to do that. We'll consent to come to T-Board and sit down with whomever they may be.
The problem is we don't know when T-Board will be fully functional.
We don't know, and we can't guarantee any specific dates until we know who the members are and can schedule it. But no, there's a provision in the
We
public
say, like,
chapter.
30 days after, or 60 days after the T-Board is formed, or I mean, some time frame like that.
We could say as soon as reasonably possible after T-Board is constituted.
And I would agree to as my dad used to say, move hell and high water to do whatever needs to be done. And a question, I hadn't really even thought about this until Mr. Moss raised it. If you implement something today and there's not another board in place, I don't know how that impacts on going forward anyway. I mean, there are a lot of unanswered questions about that. But if you don't take action today and it comes back up at T-Board, then they can address it. It's properly constituted. It's the new board, and you don't have this issue of, well, the prior board did something, and what do we do now?
The public chapter establishing T-Board continues all UMRB business to T-Board. If we order another meeting, that order would continue in effect. It would just bind. It would be an order of the board binding T-Board effectively.
What would you consider a good time frame after the board is constituted?
So before I answer that question, I think that to make it more clear for the board, let's say that we went with the staff recommendation, all right? So what would that timeline look like? Seth can speak more eloquently about that, but, it's about getting putting this case properly before, actually, it's in the staff recommendation. I'm not going to butcher it, so I'm just going to read it. Including having the matter docketed with the Secretary of State's Administrative Procedures Division. So let's say we do that. Seth, what is the most, like, what would be the soonest that we could, like, what is generally like a few months after we take it to the Secretary of State in which we would be able to have the contested case hearing? So 2 months from whenever we get it documented with the Secretary of State's office, 2 months would be the soonest that we would be able to have the contested case hearing. So essentially, if you all were wanting to alter this recommendation, you would be asking us to say, hey, at the next T-Board meeting, whenever that is, the first T-Board meeting, let's bring this back up to see if a contested case hearing is necessary. And then it would be 2 months from that meeting, okay? So the question in front of the board currently is, do you feel that we don't have enough information to attempt to oust these commissioners based on everything that's been provided today? Do you have the desire to order board staff for us to meet with the individuals at Witt Utility District to try to figure out more of the information out? That's the question now that's essentially being posed based on what Mr. Brandstetter has presented. So you as the board, you have to decide, do we want to kick the can a few months and then go through this same thing? Or do we want to take care of it today and schedule the contested case here? That's
Or maybe not have to deal with.
sure.
If-
And
You know,
with the
I
other,
don't, I'm sure Mr. Clone is not prejudging what.
no, and that was me misspeaking. And
I
I
do have a
apologize for that.
concern that that report's only been out a month,
Yes, less than a month.
less than a month.
So I think at this point, unless y'all have any more questions for Mr. Harris or Mr. Brandstetter, I think we can rein this back in to us figuring out what the next step is. Does anyone have any further questions for Mr. Harris or Mr. Brandstetter? All right. Thank you, gentlemen. So now, board, here's where we're at. You have the staff recommendation in front of you. And it is your decision on how we proceed. We had an awesome 2.5 hour long meeting. It's great spending this time with y'all. But it's, yeah, so ultimately, if you have any further questions for me, happy to answer them. If you have any, I don't know, just any concerns or change the staff recommendation, keep the staff recommendation, I'll leave it up to the board.
Yeah, address Mr. Harris.
I mean,
I just want to speak. I'm just no country boy. But I'm going to speak real plain. I'm going to tell you, it looks bad from my perspective when you see this amount of allegations and charges. That for a small utility district that has, in my opinion, the primary responsibility of providing safe, dependable drinking water to a community, which often goes unthanked. But if you have a father and 3 sons, that there is not excessive care on behalf of either the board or yourself to, as scripture would say, to abstain the very appearance of evil, that you have either same color roof, same contractor, using utility facilities, doing those things and not making as clear and as transparent as possible documentation to make sure it doesn't change into something like this. I would challenge you that regardless of whatever the finding of this board is or going forward, that you seek to be a better steward, whether it's driving a company vehicle down into Knoxville, if that allegation's true, if making sure that Bobcat knows which address to deliver equipment to make, if that allegation's true. And then 2, if the signatures are required on the check, I'd have a hard time using the same color shingles and the same contractor and the same materials on my personal house for anything that would be at a utility. It just looks bad, just being honest.
I agree.
Now, I'm not indicting you. You'll have your day, and I truly defend that everybody's innocent until proven guilty. That looks terrible, being honest. And as somebody who's grown up, my father was a manager, grown up at a water plant too, was able to go get an engineering degree and worked around. You know, you hate the black eye that it does to our industry when people look like somebody's taken family control of a public utility and used it as their own personal business. And that's what it looks like. Just being honest. And if that's in fact true, then the board didn't do its job. You know, all of those things. I have one question about a contested case, Ross, and then I'm probably ready to offer my opinion further. If the board moved to authorize the contested case, and I'll admit I have some heartburn with Mr. Terry Sellers being less than a year. You know, he can, gentlemen at East Gut, if I could ever help them and come up and do, if it's within my power, I'd help it, you know, any ability that I have. But with those that's here, and they've been there since 2015, 2016, you know, they should be familiar with the budget. They should be familiar with operations, the GL codes, management, having gone through, you know, condolences for the loss of your father, setting up an employee staffing plan and all those things, even for a small utility. If you initiate that and you get into it and you find that all these allegations, that there's adequate documentation, y'all have the authority to be able to drop that without pressing any further. Is that not true?
That is part of
So if we,
sorry, no, we currently, as the staff recommendation as it's drafted, we have the authority to drop the case if the commissioners resign, but not if we find that there's not grounds to carry the case forward. What we would have the authority to do, what we could do is try to call another special called meeting. And at that point, we would just present, we don't believe that we should proceed with this case.
And the problem with that, Mr. Pelham, is that once that happens, instituted, then any defense that any of these board members wish to do, they've got to do that on their own time. The utility cannot pay for that. And so you put them in the worst possible situation where they've got to make a decision. Do I resign and make it look like I've admitted I've done something wrong? Or do they spend their own resources to try to contest it? And postpone starting that until we can sit down and provide. I could talk for another hour in response to some of these, but I know you don't want to hear me. But I wanted to give you a flavor, like on the issue about the overtime. The district actually saved money. It was a good steward of public funds, even though it was a lot of overtime. At the end of the day, it cost the ratepayers less to have one person doing that job. That's the kind of information we want to sit down and have not had an opportunity to. You can't really do that in the investigative process. But now that the report's issued, we can do that. And Ross, the powers that say, you didn't explain this worth a darn. They come back and the board can then start it. And then the commissioners have had an opportunity to be heard. And at that time, they can say, well, no, this is not worth my effort and my money to defend. I'm going to go ahead and resign. So that's what we're asking. And I don't think that's an unfair ask. I really don't.
To clarify that we could still talk to the utility, even if he's not representing the commissioners personally, we can still talk to the utility. They can still present whatever information they have, even if we do initiate the contested case.
And also, if the board does agree with what Mr. Brandstetter is presenting, and, you know, the day we start the contested case, you know, these commissioners are going to be responsible for personally defending themselves. That is a legitimate concern, and we are worried about being able to schedule a T-board meeting sometime soon to actually address this, because we want to postpone it should we need. I think that one way we could maybe meet in the middle, if necessary, is the order says on, what's today, June 16th? On or before August 1st, board staff shall initiate a contested case hearing if they find so necessary based on the grounds of the conversations that occur between board staff and the WIT utility district. So what that's doing is saying, yeah, we'll just tell board staff to go have these discussions that Mr. Brandstetter is requesting. And then if we still feel as necessary on or around, you know, August 1, that's when we can do the contested case. And so that way we're not starting this tomorrow, so they're not going to be liable to go get any sort of personal defense right now. And that would delay. But that is only if you're amenable to what Mr. Brandstetter is presenting. I still, I stand with the staff recommendation as written.
Last question, and then I'll not to speak. If the board were ousted, what avenues are in place to avoid a leadership vacuum, some of the harder issues that eSCUD has gone into when there was not clear transfer of files, authority controls from one to another between the current seated board members.
Can you rephrase that? I think I understood what your
How
question
would-
was, but
what mechanism would be in place between the board members if ouster proceedings occurred? And if all three were ousted,
Mhm.
how would they conduct business? Because at that point, then from a utility manager or anybody's, their hands are going to be tied from conducting business until they can renominate, reseat, and
Sure.
appoint people. And then they come in totally green if there is no continuity between the boards.
right.
What mechanism would be in place for an ouster to avoid similar instance to
What happened at eSCUD essentially. Yeah, so the mechanism there is what's in the code for getting commissioners appointed whenever there's vacancies. If there isn't a quorum of a board available in order to create a list to send to the county mayor to replace these board members, it would then be up to the county mayors involved here, because this is a utility district involved in Hamlin County and Jefferson County, to make their own interim appointments. And then generally what happens is at the next meeting, they put their names on the list to send to the county mayors. So outside of that, I can't give you any quote unquote mechanism, because in my opinion, mechanism implies that it's something in the code or some sort of policy or procedure we have. It would really be relying on the good actors in the area to ensure that there is no gaps in service for the individuals involved. Will say, I mean, it doesn't happen often, right? That an entire board leaves, right? Our board has been involved in instances where that's occurred, and we haven't seen that the moment that board is ousted, everyone just doesn't have water anymore or anything of the sort, because generally there are good actors in areas, as we have seen with the East Sevier County Utility District in the conversations that I've had with the surrounding utilities, in which they are willing to provide aid. I think that we would experience something similar with the Wick Utility District.
But you run the very real danger that if it's set off to August 1st and the contested case is issued at that point, that the board members resign, and then you are left with that vacuum. And that's,
But in our history on this UMRB, at least since I've been here, we've not seen any real negative impact when that's happened.
None.
So I can cite multiples over the last couple of years where in fact I can make the argument that things improved dramatically, and the customers, which we're here to protect, their service, for lack of a better term, was improved. Just because this is ratepayer dollars and we are responsible for protecting the ratepayers. That's our ultimate charge.
and if I may respond, the ratepayers in Witt are getting a good deal. They've got good water, low water loss, reasonable charges. There's no issue at this point that their customers are not being well served.
And I've not made that argument there was, but there is also a responsibility that board follow a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that a manager, just like myself in another system, is doing their job and staff is doing their job. That's what we're here to discuss.
And the only thing I would say in response is you've got a board that is overseeing a very small staff. It's not like they have 29, 21.
I've got 110, but I mean, that was 29 in my,
110.
I have 29 in one department.
Yeah.
But those are some choices that were also made.
But when you add staff, you increase the cost. But that's all that I'm saying.
It's semantic. I get it. We can go round and round all day on
And
that.
all I'm doing is saying, is asking, I think appropriately, that you not act today, but give us this opportunity that Reeve requested, without the sort of Damocles saying, well, on August 1, they're going to start it. That's what we're asking. And I do not think that is an unreasonable ask in these circumstances with a report that just came out a month ago.
So what I think I just heard, August 1 would not be acceptable either.
Well, my concern, I'll be blunt. My concern is the staff has made a decision, and if that is, the board says we're going to do it come August 1, it certainly lessens any willingness to back off. But if the board has not set a deadline like that, and it's up to the next board, then I think it is going to give us much more of an opportunity to present our information. That's the concern. And this is the most drastic penalty that you can do, is to oust an entire board.
Respectfully, though, if you abuse public confidence and trust from the appearance of wasteful spending or personal use of utility funds, I mean, that's the objective we have as managers, board members here, to protect the customer and the consumer who may not have the technical background and experience that we would have to say, this is how we monitor and use those funds.
And again, those are allegations that have not yet been responded to, Mr. Pelham. We've not really had a chance to do that and would prefer not to be thrust into a contested case to have to.
Very much. Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion if you'd accept that. It does have some modifications to your staff recommendations. Mr. Ross?
Sure.
I would move that we postpone until September 1st, being the fact that there would be 2 regularly scheduled WIT board meetings before September 1st to allow any actions, and then contingent upon staff's determination of responses to the questions that have been asked, that the staff pursue ouster of Mr. Michael Rouse and Mr. Michael Fagan, board members that have served since 15 and 16 or 17, as is reported. I do not take any exceptions towards Mr. Sellers, who's been there for less than a year. Other parts with staff authorized to close the contested case, et cetera, with those amendments, it would be my motion. Is that clear enough?
Yeah.
I'll second.
Staff, do you have any?
Authorized.
If it's appropriate, or withdraw, if you find sufficient information that there are adequate internal controls to substantiate the management of the board.
So just to be clear, because I think I understand what you're saying, is you're directing us as board staff to go have conversations with the WIT Utility District to gather more information. September 1, should we think that there are still grounds to continue with the contested case, we then have the permission then on September 1 to call the contested case, or a decision by board staff can be made to say, we're not going to pursue this, and we'll update you at the next T-board meeting.
And update the next T-board or whomever is sitting on that board at that time.
Okay.
And I want to be clear, it would be against the seated board members that have had adequate years of experience.
Doesn't include Mr. Sellers.
Withdraw Mr. Sellers based upon your statement. Sellers that he's had less than a year of service.
Okay. So that was motioned and seconded.
We have a motion and a second. And do you have any further? No further discussion pending. We will call the roll.
Yes.
Yes.
Abstain.
No.
Yeah. Kevin, can you hear us? We're asking for your vote on that motion.
No.
Yes.
No.
Oh, interesting. I've never had this happen before. Go ahead.
Simply under public records, Mr. Bodkin, vote can count in this. It will be 3 ayes.
Okay, so what has just transpired is because of the Open Records Act, Mr. Botts can't actually participate online. So Kevin, I really appreciate you being here today and asking questions, but we can't actually record your vote. So because of that, we ended up with a vote of 3 ayes on the motion, 2 nays, and 1 abstention. So
the motion carries then.
All right, well, board, really appreciate y'all taking so much time to come down here, and I don't foresee me seeing y'all in the next 2 weeks. I mean, who knows what pops up, but really appreciate y'all's time, and see y'all whenever, right? I mean, who knows the next time, yeah?
Thank y'all for your time.
We are adjourned.